Yeah, literally everyone's going to miss this week. Now, we have to update the rankings dramatically with all the news that came out. I mean, honestly, I don't even know if the flex rankings video did any good just because so much has changed. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's run through it all. So Jordan Love is tracking to play week 9, barring a setback. Love was at practice today, is at practice yesterday, didn't miss practice at the very beginning of the week. But nonetheless, I think we now rank these Packers guys as if Jordan Love is good to go. And we will go ahead and, of course, we can update those rankings if things change. So let's first start off with, I guess, Jordan Love himself, right? Previously, I thought that there was a high probability Love was going to be missing this week. Now you're going up against Detroit in an environment in which you probably have to throw the ball. The Lions arguably have the best offense in the NFL, and the Lions have a great rush defense. So you're more likely than not looking at Love having an insane amount of pass attempts. For me personally, I would go through and I would rather have Love over Kyler in a tough matchup. I'm going to have Burrow ahead of him just because I do think that there is still some uncertainty surrounding the injury, and maybe he runs the ball just a little bit less, but obviously primarily using that as a tiebreaker. Josh Jacobs, I think at this point I could safely have him over Brian Robinson. Still a very tough matchup for Jacobs, though, going up against Detroit, so definitely not going to overreact here. Going over to Jaden Reed. We had Reed behind Amari. We had him behind Waddle, but at this point, I actually think I can move him all the way ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr., with Harrison having a tougher matchup going up against Chicago. Romeo Doubs is the other guy that you would look at here. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about with the Jacksonville players. But now that you have Love good to go, if you look at the target volume that Doubs has had as of late, has been super encouraging. I would rather have Doubs for sure over Davis, Addison, Pittman. I would put him probably right up here with what you have with the Buffalo guys. I would rather have, I'm not going to put him ahead of Tillman just because I know everybody would come for my neck. So we're going to leave that be. And then going over to tight end, I'll have Tucker Kraft ahead of Jake Ferguson. So I do think that you move up the Green Bay guys across the board here. Don't care about Jordan Whittington unless Puka Nacua misses. Keaton Mitchell listed questionable for week 9. Don't care. Tank Bigsby listed questionable for week 9. It's going to be very difficult for us to update rankings with either the Jacksonville running backs. I mean, obviously we'll talk about ETN in 1 second, but just have no idea what's going on in Jacksonville still. Obviously, I'm live streaming this on Friday night. Usually we do the afternoon last minute injury updates live stream on Saturday. Tomorrow, I do have a 50-mile ultra marathon, so I have no idea what time I'm going to be live streaming. Now, the race starts at 7. I'm imagining I'm going to be running for like 10 hours or so, but then we'll probably go get dinner. So I'll definitely be live streaming tomorrow night and Sunday morning. I just can't guarantee you what time that will be and when we are going to be able to give those injury updates with the Jacksonville players. Make sure you're subscribed, of course. Drake May listed as questionable for week 9. Actually sounds like there's a possibility that May plays, but not going to update the rankings with the Pats guys until we get confirmation. We have no Tajee Spears for this week. I don't even know if we had Spears ranked. I definitely thought that he was an interesting pickup with the injury to Pollard, but yeah, no, we had Spears already all the way at the very bottom under the assumption that he was going to be missing. Going over to Calvin Ridley, not listed on the injury report. That was expectations. Tony Pollard and both Tyler Boyd are both questionable. I'm not going to be updating the Tony Pollard injury until we get confirmation on if he will be good to go or though. Brian Robinson listed questionable. DK Metcalf listed as out. So we can go ahead and we can update the rankings that we have for these Seattle names. So with Metcalf, I was kind of expecting this initially. They kept on giving us wording as if he had a shot to play. Clearly, that appears to no longer be the case. And looking at Jackson Smith and Jigba, in my mind, JSN slides up. This is a spot in which you have a pretty good matchup against the Rams. He has cemented himself on this depth chart over Tyler Lockett. He's in a better offense than what you're going to get with guys like Tillman, Myers, Ridley. So for me, Flowers is a really tough matchup. I have Ladd McConkey on my team in the Flock League. I would probably start JSN over him. I don't think I can get him ahead of Josh Downs, though. So we're going to move JSN up to 25. Going through and looking at the other guy we're talking about, Tyler Lockett, I thought that he was very interesting previously. Last week, he does absolutely nothing. I still think in deep leagues, maybe if you start multiple flexes, you could potentially start Lockett. We'll put him in here at 37, right ahead of Addison, who's only had one game with 5 or more targets this year. Dallas Goedert listed out for week 9, so let's just go ahead. Let's make sure that we have this ranking updated. Did we have Goddard in here? Yes, we did. So let's get his butt all the way at the very bottom. Going over to our next update. Tyrone Tracy clears concussion protocol. This was a big L for me, where, I mean, just earlier this week, I was saying, oh, okay, Tracy gets the concussion on Monday. This is a team that took about 17 days to clear Malik Neighbors. I thought Tracy was going to miss this week, then add the week 11 bye, but no, looks like Tracy is just good to go. So we need to be making sure that we rank Tracy appropriately here. At this point, Tracy, we have right ahead of Chase Brown. Chase Brown's about to fly up these rankings as well. Tracy's in a worse offense than James Conner. Okay, these are my rankings, of course. And y'all know I'm an idiot. I get things wrong all the time. But for me, I have Conner in the flock league. I have DeAndre Swift as well. Would I go through and would I start Tyrone Tracy if I picked him up off the waiver wire over James Conner? Personally, I wouldn't. I would still go with the guy we have the large sample with in what I presume to be a better offense, even if it's a tough matchup. So for me, Tracy's still clearly a must-start player this week, of course. Now, in comparison to Dobbins, Swift, Hunt, Conner, I also think these other running backs are must-start options. If Brian Robinson plays, I think he's a must-start option. So Tracy looks great, but I still think it's a bad offense. It's not like he's had consistent receiving usage. So I'm not going to be moving Tracy up much further. Hopefully he crushes, though. Don't care about Zamir White. Obviously, we already talked about Jordan Love. Quentin Johnson, Hayden Hurst, not listed on the injury report. Maybe this makes you not want Will Dissly anymore. Don't care about Jamal Williams. Obviously, Kondre Miller is listed as out. So really, this is the only reason people are putting this out there. I mean, obviously, Kamara is already a top 5 running back. Nothing is changing that. Derek Carr, 100% good to go. Make sure you're starting Chris Olave for the love of God. Now, this is what was the surprise. Zach Moss listed as doubtful for week 9. So this guy right here in Chase Brown now is slated to have all of the work in Cincinnati. This is the best matchup you could possibly ask for going up against the Raiders. Chase Brown has had consistent usage as a receiver. This is what is presumed to be a top 5 offense if you look at Las Vegas sportsbooks this week. So for me, we are going to be extremely aggressive with Chase Brown. I'm going to move Chase Brown up to about RB15. I would start him over Tracy. I think Chase Brown's in a much better offense with what appears to be possibly a better target share going to the running backs here. I would start him over Jacobs. I think he has a much better matchup. I think he is more so in the range of like Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, James Cook. Like, please, for the love of God, make sure you're starting Chase Brown. And then here is what we have with the Puka update. Puka Nacua listed questionable for week 9. The Sean McVay quote is, "I wouldn't bet against Puka playing." So, I don't know what to do with this. I have Puka ranked as a mid-wide receiver 2 post re-injuring his knee. I'd rather have Kupp rest of season at this point, but I'm not going to update our weekly rankings until we get confirmation on what's going on here. David Njoku not listed on the injury report. Great to hear. Obviously didn't miss practice earlier. Lamar was missing practice. Lamar is good to go. Okay. Juju, don't care about. Now, this is another surprise. Jonathan Brooks, unlikely to play week 9. Jonathan Brooks had been practicing in full, everything trending towards Jonathan Brooks being good to go. And now with Brooks not playing week 9, we do need to go ahead and look to move up Chuba Hubbard dramatically here. Hubbard we previously had as RB27 in these rankings. He's still in a relatively bad offense. I mean, very, very bad offense. So whatever matchup going up against the Saints, but I can more so comfortably project out his usage than I can with somebody like Ramondre Stevenson. Javante's in a very bad offense. The thing is with Hubbard, he still did end up losing usage to Miles Sanders this past week, which was extremely frustrating. So I don't want to overreact here. We already had Jonathan Brooks ranked as a player that you couldn't start this week, though. And Chuba Hubbard will move up the rest of season rankings as well. Hopefully Leggett plays. Adam Thielen won't. T. Higgins is doubtful as well. So going over to wide receiver, with Higgins missing, we are going to have to go ahead. We are going to have to move him to the very bottom of the rankings. And we are also going to have to move Chase up to 1. But obviously, that isn't a massive, massive transition. And I think you could make an argument, and honestly, I'm going to do it. Without Higgins, I think I would play Love in an environment against Detroit where they're probably going to have to throw the ball a ton over Burrow, assuming Love's good to go. Now, let's see what we have with our next stuff. Tracy, good to go. We already talked about that. Higgins didn't practice. Gabe Davis, game time decision. You don't start Gabe Davis regardless. Brian Thomas Jr., game time decisions, as well as Travis Etienne. So, I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. was at practice all week. Just Jacksonville gives us freaking no information about these guys whatsoever. I'm going to rank Brian Thomas Jr. as if he were to be playing, and then obviously we can go ahead and we can lower him down dramatically if he doesn't. I would put him right in the range of what you have maybe behind, like, I would rather have him over Jaden Reed, even if he is banged up here. But obviously, I'm not going to rank him as high as we would otherwise with the injuries. And then with Gabe Davis not being cleared yet, I would actually probably prefer the Green Bay players over him. Okay. Now, moving this over, Drake May limited in practice. And then, yeah, I think that should be it for all the practice reports today. Obviously, we had a ton. Let me submit these updated rankings on the site. We'll continue to tinker with these. And, yeah, let's go over and let's answer as many questions on the site as we possibly can. I definitely want to reiterate, of course, every single day in the live stream, even tomorrow after the race, we are going to come through and we are going to be answering as many of your fantasy football questions as possible. If you ever wanted to get any in, all you got to do is go over to flockfantasy.com, hit the button in the top right corner that says expert advice. There you can send a super message, start sit question, trade question, or a team review. You can send this literally whenever you want, even when we're not live streaming. You don't even have to be in the stream, because when it's answered, you're going to get an automated link sent to you with a custom timestamp where as soon as we answer your question, you just click that link and it takes you to the section of the live stream which your question was answered. Yeah, but if you wanted a team review, I'd highly recommend taking advantage of the free offer that we have over there on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, you are going to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you're going to be getting that free team review in the live stream that we are doing every single night. And on top of that, if we could find it, you're going to be getting a free Jalen Hurts pick, more than less than half a total yard as well, plus a 50% deposit bonus if we didn't already say it. Just make sure you use promo code FLOCK and make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address if you wanted that free team review in the live stream. But our first question is going to be a start-sit question coming out from Brazy, where here we need a lineup filled out with 2 flexes. We have some additional news where now Chase Brown looks like that absolute auto start under the assumption you have no Zach Moss. We're going to go Chase Brown, and then for our other flex spot, plan A is Puka Nacua. If Puka Nacua does not play, plan B is Brian Thomas Jr. If Brian Thomas does not play, then plan C is Jaden Reed. If Jordan Love does not play, then plan D is Amari Cooper. So obviously very, very difficult to go through and read what we have right now with the wide receiver injuries. But if possible, we would go with Puka here. Now, Just Sherman, always happy to see us, says, only worried about running back depth, would probably get vetoed. This is Devonta Smith. This is Jamar Chase easily. I have Devonta Smith in the Flock League. I don't even care we have it running. I mean, you have Saquon Barkley, James Cook at running back. You're absolutely chilling. Go ahead and get Jamar Chase here. And it would be lame if your league vetoed that. Next question is going to be coming out from Swerp P Nasty. 7-1. The team is Lamar, Bijan, Gibbs, Neighbors, McLaurin, and Evans. We're going from Dobbins to Bijan, clear upgrade. Or let's go London to Bijan, upgrade in my mind. Dobbins to Evans, downgrade. Darius Slayton, not even worth the roster spot. We're paying Worthy and Bigsby to get it done. Since you are a 7-1 team where we can think about the long-term upside for the fantasy football playoffs, we would go ahead and we would take the Evans side here, just because presumably Evans could be that top 10 wide receiver once he comes back with no Godwin in this offense. On a different roster, I think it would be a different answer, though. Now, next question coming out from a Kennedy. This is Achane, Hopkins, London versus Javonte, Chase, Neighbors, and Evans. So Achane to Neighbors, lateral move up to you. I think most people would prefer Achane, London to Evans, clear downgrade. Hopkins to either Javonte or Chase Brown, clear upgrade. That's an interesting spot, right? Because now, especially with the Zach Moss injury, Chase Brown looks like I don't know, locked and loaded, high-end RB2 going to the future. Neighbors looks like how about this? Let's call Neighbors and London about the same. We call Neighbors and London about the same. Hopkins and Achane versus Evans, Brown, Javonte. Unless you are a team that it has a guaranteed playoff spot, I probably go ahead. I probably just keep the Devon Achane side, especially with Achane already through the bye week. Absolutely cooking here. But if you had a guaranteed playoff spot where you could go through and wait for the long-term upside with Evans, I'm not going to fault you at all for that. Now, Blayton coming out with one of those free team reviews. Excited to check this out. Says, Chasen Worthy Neighbors. This is the number one team in the league analyzer. It is a 12-team league where you can start up to 4 wide receivers weekly. We play a game against the median. We are currently 11-5. Quarterback, we are rolling with Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. So when you are sitting here with both these quarterbacks, obviously you are chilling. I mean, Daniels gives you the elite ceiling for every single week. Caleb maybe continues to improve. That way, when you have to play him during the Daniels bye, he's not an absolute bomb. If you wanted to drop Caleb, I wouldn't mind only rostering one quarterback with Daniels on the team. But the thing is, in your league, it's a little bit deeper, so the waiver wire options aren't as good. So we're probably just chilling with both quarterbacks. Going over to what we have at running back, we are currently sitting with an elite RB1 with Kyron, a strong RB2 with Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason, who presumably is about to turn into a 0, and then some depth pieces that are an injury away from making a difference, such as Zach Charbonnet, maybe Keaton Mitchell, Justice Hill. For me, I think the profile of like Keaton Mitchell, Justice Hill are guys that I would easily move off of. Because let's go through the hypothetical of a Derrick Henry injury. Derrick Henry gets injured. What happens in this backfield? My personal expectations would be, okay, Mitchell and Justice Hill probably split. I don't know if either guy would be startable for you. Obviously, if you could find a way to combine both their points into a singular player, then yeah, we would be excited, but you're not able to do that. So even if you were to get that injury, I don't know if we are excited to go through and play either option. So what I would probably look to do here is I would actually drop Justice Hill. I would drop Marshawn Lloyd. I'm sorry, I apologize. I would drop Keaton Mitchell. I would drop Justice Hill. Obviously, if Marshawn Lloyd wasn't on the IR, we would drop him as well, but I'm assuming he's not taking up a roster spot. And I would pivot over and go get guys like Jalen Warren, go get somebody like Ray Davis. Because if you were to see an injury to Najee Harris, if you were to see an injury to James Cook, we've already seen it, and you know that you can go through and start those other handcuff backs. So for me, the profile of the secondary running backs in Baltimore, not nearly as exciting. Going over to wide receiver, we have a couple elite options. I mean, you are sitting here with the combo of Chase and Neighbors, and you even have London as well. So we have 3 top 10 wide receivers rest of season. It's a league in which the depth does matter a little bit more. Again, it's a 12-team format where you start 2 receivers and 2 flexes. So if we can get 4 wide receivers into the starting lineup, it's not inherently a spot in which you should be looking to sell anybody in a 2-for-1 deal to go get an upgrade elsewhere. So the wide receiver depth of like Worthy, Tillman, Leggett may actually make a difference with this team in particular. Going over to McBride, obviously McBride, an elite level tight end. You can start him every single week. You're going to have to pick up a secondary option for the week 11 bye, but this is a really strong team. I don't know if there is much that you could look to do with the roster. I think, obviously, as we already discussed, I am making the adjustments with the running backs that you have down there at the very bottom end. But beyond that, I think you're in a really comfortable position with this team. It is the number 1 team in the league analyzer for a reason. It is 11-5 for a reason. If it was a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, we would maybe explore the possibility of going through and selling some of the productive assets that we have right now to go and pick up an injured guy, whether that's Nico, whether that's Evans. But the issue is, if you were to sell those productive assets right now for one of the playoff options, in a league in which the depth does matter a decent amount, we don't have enough of it to cover in the short term. So I actually don't think we make one of those playoff deals, but obviously it's a phenomenal team. It is the best team in the league analyzer. I just think for me personally, I would go through and I'd make those pivots when it comes to the guys that we are rostering down there at the bottom end of the bench at running back. But I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. And again, thank you so much for taking advantage of that free team review offer. Now, Bambo, always happy to see us, says, other guy is heavily considering. Let me know if there are any adjustments. I will say in general, I absolutely hate seeing these deals where we are sending 5 guys, or we're sending half our roster. If you're ever sending half your roster, it's very, very rarely ever a situation in which both teams are going to be winning. 99% of the time, you have one squad getting all the value, the other not really moving the needle. Now here, if we break this down, DJ Moore to Jaden Reed, give me Jaden Reed. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet to James Cook, give me Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet. Ladd McConkey, Tillman to Neighbors, give me Neighbors, not close. So I don't think this is like the super unfair deal by any means. I would personally probably go with the Cook, Reed, and Neighbor side of things. I do think you're giving up the best player, but I think you're probably getting back the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th best options in the deal. Now, Leslie Well coming out with our next question. So, trade where we're sending Najee and Nico for Dobbins and Cup. Well, I'd clearly rather have Dobbins rest of season than I would Najee. However, with that being said, realistically speaking, I don't know why would we would want to be selling Nico Collins here. The only scenario in which I think that this could potentially make sense for you is if you're in a situation where you're currently like 3-5, where you can't afford to think long-term upside, and you just need points right this second, and pivoting from Nico to Cup, you're getting a receiver that is healthy already through the bye week as well, so you're getting 2 additional games. But for me, if we can afford to think about the long-term upside, I mean, I think that Nico Collins is just the winning side here. Nico's by far and away the best player in the deal. I mean, if Puka was listed out for the season or something, we could strongly consider it, but that's just not the case right now. Now, our next question coming out from Isaac Gibson. This is Brooks and Chubb versus Dobbins and Hunt. I think you go Dobbins and Hunt at this point. So, from what I read, since they are deciding to not play Brooks this week, they have until Wednesday to activate Brooks, and if they don't, then it's not happening. which would be extremely frustrating. I want to see this guy this season. But to be fair, I mean, if you were like playing it as if it was a video game, they have no reason to do it. Like, obviously, the Panthers should keep their young running back healthy. They should make sure he's 100%. And it almost suits them better to lose games than win games at this point. Now, of course, there's the human element of it where Canales maybe needs to win a couple games. If you're trying to keep a job, if you're trying to give the fans something to look forward to, bringing him in. But there's a very real possibility Brooks isn't brought in this season now that he is not playing this week, which sucks. I didn't expect it. But if you can pivot to like Dobbins, I think you do it. Now, Stroud Taylor is our next trade for Allen, Chubb, Mooney. Here, Taylor is the best asset in this. Obviously, Stroud looked horrendous last night, but with that being said, Stroud was super low in our rankings for a reason. You had no Nico. You had no Diggs. You had a really tough matchup. You should be getting Nico Collins back in this next week. And more importantly, Jonathan Taylor is just set up to crush as a true RB1 rest of season, especially now that you have Flacco under center, where you can't see some targets going in his direction. Now, Nidell coming out with a massive, massive dono. Thank you so much. My God, let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question, just in case there's anything else you want to send my way. But saying, lost Rashee Rice and Brandon Ayuk. We had Njoku, but dropped him and traded Jacobs for McBride and Kyler earlier in the season. I'm 6-2 somehow, getting sneaky wins, but it'll catch up. What type of trades would you recommend, my guy? Love the channel. Been watching for a while now. Thank you so much. Really do appreciate you. I'm going to be excited to go ahead and check this out. So the first thing to point out here is this is the 6th team in this league with the league analyzer. So I know you're saying that we're getting some sneaky wins that's going to catch up. Looking at the roster, yeah, probably doesn't look to be a true 6-2 roster in a 10-team league in particular, but definitely can go through, make some pivots, and try our best to put this with more sound footing going into the future. But anyway, starting off at quarterback, we do have Kyler. When you have Kyler Murray, you're able to start him pretty much every week, regardless of the matchup. Definitely less excited about him in a 10-team league in comparison to a 12-teamer. But yeah, still fine with Kyler. You have the rushing upside, and you're hoping the offense is going to improve as you go through the year. And then Darnold, you can play, obviously, in the Week 11 bye week for Kyler. Looking at the quarterbacks that are available on the waiver wire, you have Caleb, you have Tua, you have Nix, you have Geno, you have Stafford, you have Winston, you have May. So, honestly, if this was my team, I mean, it depends on what your perspective is. If you think Kyler is the tier of quarterback in which you're never going to consider starting Darnold over him, then at that point, I think you could potentially explore the possibility of going through and dropping Darnold's and picking up another exciting running back off waivers. However, if you think that there are certain matchups where Kyler has a tough matchup this week per se, going up against the Bears, where you would start Darnold instead, then obviously you can roster both. But you are in a league in which there's plenty of quarterback production out there on the waiver wire. So, I mean, you always could go through and you always could just pick up a quarterback during the Kyler bye. Now, going over to running back, this is definitely the weakest spot on this team. In a 10-team league, we have Brian Robinson as my RB1. I would not like that. I love Brian Robinson as an RB2, but RB1's a little aggressive. Ramondre Stevenson's the RB2 here. Do not like that. I'd be fine with him at RB3. We have Brooks. We have Etienne. We have Hubbard. So almost positive news in a way for this team. If you have both Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks, you'd almost rather Brooks not come back in or come into this offense, just because then at that point it would turn into a committee where you don't know if either one of them are going to be viable. Where obviously, if you don't have Brooks, it does look like we could potentially use Chuba. So I know it's weird, but the news of Brooks not coming back this week may actually be a good thing for you. Going over to the waiver wire, we are sitting with Bigsby. I don't think you need to cut any of the running backs on our team for Tank Bigsby. But again, going back to the fact that you do have some pretty strong options at quarterback on waivers. If you don't think that you would ever go through and start Darnold over Kyler, I think I would cut Darnold and I would pick up Bigsby instead. Now going over to what we have at wide receiver. We have Lamb, Ladd, Downs. So we have the elite wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 combo. I'd be excited about this in a 12-team format, probably a little bit underweight in a 10-team league in particular. It's a league in which you can start 4 receivers weekly, so the depth does matter a bit more here. And then we have Addison, Keenan at the very bottom. I don't know if you still can have Adam Thielen on your IR, but if Thielen's not on the IR, for me personally, I would see more upside with one of these rookies like Rome Odunze, where I would cut Adam Thielen and pick up Rome. But obviously, if Thielen's on your IR, dropping him is not going to open up a roster spot for you. But yeah, my thought process with Thielen is it's one of the league's worst offenses. He's 33, I want to say. Coming off an injury, I don't see how Thielen makes a difference in a 10-team league. And going over to tight end, we have the top tight end production with McBride and Kraft. So for me, I think that Kraft is that potential sell high candidates. Where if we are looking at Tucker Kraft, this is a player that has 5 touchdowns over the past 25 targets, which if you look at the historical touchdown rate, we should be expecting for tight ends. We are going to see some natural regression here for Kraft, both with his touchdown rate as well as his breakaway play rate. So I think I would potentially look to sell Kraft, especially when we have McBride, if we could, in a 2-for-1 deal to upgrade the running back position. The issue is it's a 10-team league, so there won't be too many teams that need help at tight ends. This team has like Kincaid and Likely. If they're disappointed of Kincaid, if we could sell Kraft and maybe like Ramondre Stevenson to pivot over to James Conner, I think that'd be very interesting as well. Since you're 6-2, I mean, we can begin to think about the fantasy football playoffs. Going over and trying to find another team that potentially could use some help at tight ends. This team is Dallas Goedert and Mark Andrews. If we wanted to try to send them Kraft and that option like Ramondre, Jonathan Brooks, Travis Etienne, whoever it may be, to go get up to DeAndre Swift, I think that could help our roster. And another thing that your team could do, of course, just because we can afford it as we sit here at 6-2, is we can afford to go ahead and trade for the fantasy football playoff options that are injured currently, but could give you a higher ceiling later on. So, I mean, an option like DK Metcalf could stand out in that if you're looking at our wide receiver room, I actually have been, okay, this is a good question for y'all. So I'm sure the majority of y'all know Sal Vetri. In the Flock League, he currently needs a win. He doesn't have much running back depth. I am slated to be a playoff team, so I can and I have plenty of depth as well, so I can take on the injured guy. We've been negotiating. Who would y'all rather have? Because my team's very similar to the one we're looking at right now. I also have Ladd McConkey and Ramondre Stevenson. Would you rather have Ladd McConkey and Ramondre Stevenson, or DK Metcalf rest of season? Ladd McConkey and Ramondre Stevenson or DK Metcalf rest of season? What side are you going with? Please let me know in the live chat. As Metcalf, not only do you have him out this week, but he's also going to be on the bye next week. We got DK, 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 Lad, DK, DK, DK. David says Lad's a top 5 wide receiver now. I wish you were in my league. I wish I could send you Lad. Looks like a lot of people are on the DK side. I was playing maybe a little too much hardball where we'll see what it goes down to. Maybe I end up making that deal, but I think that's a deal that could make sense for your roster as well here, where you are currently sitting at 6-2, and also in your league, the waiver wire options are a lot better, where if you were to go through and if you were to trade like Lad and Ramondre and go get DK, you could pick up Tank Bigsby off the waiver wire for free. So, I mean, it would be more like, oh, you're trading Lad and Ramondre and you're getting back DK Metcalf and Tank Bigsby. So I think that's the other move that you could look to make with a team that's currently 6-2, is you have the luxury where we can afford to go out there and sell some of the assets that are producing right now for pieces that have the upside rest of season that may currently be injured. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, really do appreciate you. Really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. Again, I did hook you up with both that free start sit question as well as that free trade question. But thank you again for being a member of the flock. I know you've been with us for a very long time. I do appreciate you and hope that I was able to help you out in some way. But again, if you have any trade ideas that you want to send my way, please don't hesitate to do so on the site. You should have that free trade question voucher. Now, Lobo coming out with the next question. This is a trade where we're sending Taylor, Brian Thomas for Achane Olave. I have Taylor, Achane ranked back-to-back. I have Brian Thomas, Olave ranked back-to-back. It's a lazy answer. It's a crappy answer, but the real answer is it's legitimately just up to you. If you think Achane's a top 5 running back rest of season, no hesitation. You're not worried at all about potentially a Raheem Mostert goal line role, then go ahead, take the Achane and Olave side. Very fair deal. But like I said, again, I do think for me, this is a personal preference type trade, and I wouldn't fault you for going one way or another. Now, Lobo coming out with our next question says, first trade was accepted, but this might be on the trade and on the table instead. What would you choose? Much love, my friend. Looking at this, Brian Robinson or Ramondre downgrade, Taylor to Bijan upgrade if it's a full PPR format, Brian Thomas to Amari Cooper downgrade. For me, I would probably take the Taylor side, but also for me, to be honest with you, I don't really view Ramondre Stevenson as a reliable starter going into the future. Maybe I've been burned too many times for benching Ramondre in the weeks he goes off, starting Ramondre in the weeks he's a dud. But I can't trust him at this point. Now, Double Tap coming out with our next question here. This is a question where we need a flex. James Conner doesn't have a good matchup, but James Conner is fully healthy. And at the same time, you have a guaranteed workload here with 20-plus opportunities and a small role as a receiver. So I would go ahead and take James Conner. Fully healthy, though, I definitely think you can make an argument for Brian Thomas. Now, going over to our next question. This one coming out from Celerus says 6-2, Bijan, Brees at running back, both with the week 12 bye, Wilson on the team. Okay, so I don't know if that matters much here. Cup to Adams, clear downgrade. Rome at this point is just kind of a throw-in. You're getting Hunt to fill in a week 12 bye, where who knows what if Pacheco somehow, some way makes it back by then. But then you have Swift as well. Just a heads up, Devontae Adams, of course, will have the week 12 bye too. Um, if this is a 10-team league, the issue is the depth's just not going to matter as much. Here's what I think you could do if you really thought that you needed the running back depth to just cover a bye. I don't love that thought process. But if you wanted to make this deal, all I would ask is wait a little bit of time and see if we can get an update when it comes to the Puka Nacua injury. Because if Puka Nacua is going to miss, I mean, what if Puka ends up back on the IR? We just simply don't know yet. There's a chance he plays this weekend. We have no freaking idea. And you sold Cooper Kupp, you get screwed with this. So in general, I hate the idea of structuring a trade because a couple of our running backs have the same bye week. But it's a fair price point because at this point, Rome does look like he is effectively a zero here. Now, going over to our next question. This was coming out from Blue. This says, start set. Running back, we go ahead. I would still play Jacobs over Tracy. I know that Tracy obviously is the better matchup, but Jacobs is in the better offense. Wide receiver, St. Brown, Neighbors. Oh, dear God. We go Tyreek, but if Puka misses, then you pivot over to Cooper Kupp. But crazy that you'd have to bench two players here. Crazy. But let's move this over. This is going to be a free Underdog team review. This is a $1,000 buy-in league here for M. Grosme. $1,000 buy-in league. We're 6-2 and probably looking to trade away Najee for a more reliable running back too for the playoffs. Any tips or advice? Thanks. Thank you. Here, this is the Ward. The Ward court order. Your boy can't read. Your boy's an idiot. I apologize. But yeah, we are 12-4, it says. So maybe we have a game against the league median. Maybe the league analyzer's pulling something wrong here. But regardless, 6-2, 12-4, tomato, tomato. I'm looking at this quarterback. We're rolling with Hurts. Hurts, you're already through the bye week, so you don't need to roster another quarterback. You start the guy every week regardless. So just really comfortable spot to be in, of course. Going over to what we have at running back, we have Kyron, so we have the elite RB1. We have Najee, who has been productive so far. Now, obviously, he had the benefit of the Jalen Warren injury earlier on. Now Warren's back in. The receiving usage has dipped for Najee, but he's had a couple games rushing over 100 yards with Russ. But still, probably difficult to project that Steelers offense to be that good rest of season. I think the Steelers are very good, of course, just given the fact they have, probably the best special teams in the league and arguably one of the top defenses. And then beyond that, we don't really have anybody at running back. We have some depth pieces. Like Roshan could be exciting if you get an injury to Swift. Zeke, maybe something. Probably. Zeke's nothing. Blake Corum could be exciting if you get an injury, of course, to Kyron. But ultimately, running back depth here is extremely limited. Now, this is a league in which you can start up to 4 wide receivers weekly. So wide receiver depth, definitely we want to go through and we want to build it out a little bit more than a 10-team league where you start 2 receivers and 1 flex, where everything that we are looking to do is just take a wide receiver depth piece, make a 2-for-1 deal, and go get an upgrade. Wide receiver depth piece, 2-for-1 deal, go get an upgrade. Wide receiver depth piece, 2-for-1 deal, go get an upgrade. Here, it's not nearly that simple in a league in which the depth actually does matter. We can get 4 of these receivers into the lineup weekly. We have A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, Devontae Adams, Brian Thomas Jr. So if this was a league in which you only started 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, I would highly recommend going through and taking Devontae Adams after the massive spike week and seeing if we could potentially go ahead and sell Devontae Adams with Najee Harris to go get the best running back we possibly could inside our starting lineup. Now, the thing is, since it's a much deeper format, I don't think that's something you have to do. I don't even think it's something you want to do. I would much prefer just looking at our opponents going, okay, I'm going to continue to beat you at wide receiver every week, and I'm going to continue to beat you at the flex spots every week. Who cares that my running back 2 is only average? I'm crushing everywhere else. Going over to tight end, you're about to get Hawkinson back in. Like this week. So tight end's great. So this is a great team across the board here. Really the only thing that I could nitpick is what we have at the very bottom end of the roster. I don't know if we're actually rostering Khalif Raymond. If we are, I would for sure drop him because I see absolutely no path for him to hit our starting lineup. Whereas I could see a very clear path for Ray Davis to, win you this league. Where, if you could go ahead and if you could drop Raymond for Ray Davis, I think that's a clear pivot. Outside of that, what the hell could we do? I think that's about it. This is a phenomenal team. You've optimized it exactly for your league format. We are a team destined to go to the playoffs. That's only going to get better with Nico Collins coming back in, where we're also dealing with the Brian Thomas Jr. injuries. So, I really think the only thing for you to do, which is obviously the most boring answer I could give, but would be to go ahead and just play it patient. Wait until you get Nico Collins back in. Wait until you get Brian Thomas Jr. back in. But you are in a super comfortable spot, optimized for the format. Exactly. And if it was a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, I would 100% say you need to go through and you need to sell Najee Harris and a receiver depth piece to go get that upgraded running back, go get a more reliable RB2. But here in this league, that's not something I'm wanting. Here in this league, I think we leave as is. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock, and I really hope I was able to help you out. But great team. You're number 1 in the league analyzer for a reason. Now, Andrew has our next team here. Says, hey, Mason, congrats on the site. Thank you. Loving the tools. League is a half PPR looking to trade current value for playoff value. What do you think of selling Flowers or Tank? Also, looking at quarterback changes, maybe Allen, Daniels, DK. I could part with Tillman, but I'm biased after he gave me a 25 point at the flex. LOL, thanks. No, thank you. So a couple different things. Half PPR formats. Here, you're going to be a little bit more skewed to having that top. And this is just a tiny difference, right? But a little bit more skewed having that top end quarterback. They'll make a slightly higher percentage of your starting lineup output every week. A little more skewed to having running back in the flex in comparison to wide receiver as well. But it's not nearly as dramatic as it would be in a non-PPR league, of course. Okay, so we are currently 3rd in the league analyzer. So there is that little group of 3 teams that does appear to be separated from the rest. We are 5-3, so it does make sense for us to potentially go out there and think about the fantasy playoffs. Starting off at quarterback, we have Burrow and Stafford. Neither quarterback has rushing upside, right? I'm definitely more excited about these QBs in an environment in which you're getting 6 points per passing touchdown, because then the rushing upside of your quarterbacks won't be mattering as much. Obviously, we're hoping that Puka's healthy. We're hoping that Higgins is healthy. Should make a pretty big difference here for the quarterbacks. Going over to running back, we are currently sitting with the 2 best running, 2 very strong RBs, right? This is a big reason why we are this good. We are sitting with the combo of Saquon Barkley as well as Jahmyr Gibbs. The main thing to point out is going to be the fact that Saquon Barkley and Gibbs are already through their bye week as well. So presumably any depth that we would need, we would be chasing the ceiling rather than the floor. The only time that you would need to start an additional running back would be as if you're in a spot in which you get the injury to Barkley or you get the injury to Gibbs. Now going over to wide receiver, we have Harrison, Smith, Dell, Flowers, Tillman. You have quality wide receivers down there on the waiver wire as well, such as Romeo Doubs, Jalen McMillan. So in my mind, and Jordan Addison, the very, very easy play, if possible, it's just much easier said than done, is if you could go through and if we could potentially package together two of these guys in a 2-for-1 deal, where if we could send maybe Dell and Flowers, send Tillman and Dell, and just go get a wide receiver upgrade while at the same time picking up an additional wide receiver for free off the waiver wire, such as Romeo Doubs or Jordan Addison. I mean, that is by far and away the easiest deal for this team to make. Another thing that you could presumably look to do as well is try to package together Dell and maybe somebody like Joe Burrow and go get that upgrade at the quarterback position. Because hypothetically, you go through and you package together Tank Dell and Burrow, we go get an upgrade at quarterback. Then at that point, obviously, 2-for-1 deal, we already open up a roster spot. You can pick up Romeo Doubs for free. And at the same time, if we got the elite level quarterback, you could presumably drop Matthew Stafford and only would have to roster one QB, and you could pick up somebody like Ray Davis, pick up somebody like Jordan Addison. So to go through and see if there are any teams that could potentially be interested in that. The teams that are struggling at wide receiver right now, this team, their wide receiver 1 is Xavier Worthy. Their wide receiver 2 is Pittman. Wide receiver 3 is Shakir. The issue is they don't have a quarterback. That'd be an upgrade for us. I'm going over to our next roster. This team has Debo, Ladd, Lockett, Bateman. So Bateman's here. They had the Rice injury. They have both Jaden Daniels and Josh Allen. If possible, I would obviously love to trade for either one of these quarterbacks. Now, the thing is, much easier said than done, as we already mentioned. And it probably wouldn't be enough to be moving off of Tank Dell in that instance. So instead of selling Dell, Flowers, or Tillman, what you'd probably end up having to do is sell Devonta Smith. But honestly, if you were to go through and sell, say, Smith and Burrow and pivot over to Josh Allen, pivot over to Jaden Daniels, I don't think that'd be the worst thing in the world if you were able to just make that deal and then pick up Jordan Addison or pick up Romeo Doubs for completely free off the waiver wire. I do want to reiterate that I would for sure send them the initial offer, however, of a player such as Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, Cedric Tillman, and I'd be willing to go up to Devonta Smith. I mean, they're clearly incentivized to go through and trade you one of those options down there at the bottom end. It just comes down to, are they willing to? Are they excited about either one of your receivers? But I mean, if they are, it very easily could be a win-win here. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. Again, thank you so much for taking advantage of that free team review offer. I hope I was able to help you out, and I hope we get to see you out in a live stream sometime soon as well. But let's move this over to our next question. Coming out from Bodie says, if Pollard doesn't play, do we play Tracy, Spears, or Hopkins? For sure, we are going to go with Tracy here. Now, Spears is not going to be playing. He's already been ruled out, which does make it a little interesting to just stand by Pollard, because obviously you are going to get just guaranteed every touch out of this backfield, including the receiving usage as well. But with that being said, I mean, you do have a lot of optionality on what you want to do here between Tracy and Pollard. Now, Jay Garza coming out with our next question. Running back, we are going to go ahead and we are going to be jamming in Aaron Jones, must start play every single week, especially in this matchup. Wide receiver, we go with Darnell Mooney. And then there in the flex, I think we are probably going to end up going with Chuba Hubbard. I wouldn't have said that previously, but now you have no Brooks in this game, which obviously does make Hubbard significantly more appealing when we get the guaranteed touches. But our next question coming out from Dominic. Really appreciate you. Going to be excited to check this out for you, my friend. Thank you so much for the support. I'm going to hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free start sit question too. Says, took your advice and traded Najee for Aaron Jones. Love that move. And also threw in Mooney and somehow got back Debo. Okay, yeah, we're absolutely crushing here. Could you pick my lineup for the week and let me know if there are any other trades? Well, congrats. We are currently 4th in the league analyzer. Honestly, after making that trade, I would have assumed that we would have been a little bit higher, but still, regardless, we are extremely excited about this. Going over, looking at what we have at quarterback. You currently are sitting with Daniels. Obviously, this is an elite quarterback you start every single week, regardless of what the matchup is, with very little to no hesitation either. The only thing that you would potentially point out is the fact that he has the week 14 bye, so potentially you're going to have to go through, you're going to have to roster another option in week 14, but it's definitely not a concern of ours right now. Going over to what we have at running back, we are currently rolling out Achane, so we have a locked and loaded RB1. In my mind, I think you could say Aaron Jones is a low-end RB1, high-end RB2 as well. Bucky Irving, Travis Etienne, phenomenal depth pieces. It is interesting, Jordan Mason's out there on the waiver wire. For me, I still think Mason's ahead of Garindo if Jordan Mason is healthy. Now, obviously, it's not a guarantee whatsoever. But if we do get some positive reports coming out of San Francisco regarding the Jordan Mason shoulder injury, I wouldn't fault you at all for going through and pivoting off of Isaac Garindo over to Jordan Mason. Going over to what we have at wide receiver, we are currently sitting with Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel, Jaden Reed. It's a league in which you can only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, so the wide receiver depth doesn't matter much. Instead, we are chasing the highest ceiling possible. We have DJ Moore. DJ Moore is a quality fill-in because if we go through and if we look at this team, Tyreek's through his bye, but neither is Deebo or Reed. So we actually probably need the depth of DJ Moore for the short term. We have Kyle Pitts in the long term. I absolutely love the moves that we made. And honestly, at this point, I think it's going to be difficult for us to say much here. I mean, if you're looking at Kyle Pitts in particular, I do think that Pitts is a tight end 1 rest of season. But I don't view him in that true alpha tier with the guys like Kittle, Bowers, Kelsey, McBride. So, I mean, if you could potentially take a depth piece and go make a 2-for-1 deal to upgrade at tight ends, I think that could be a viable strategy, especially when we're sitting with some quality running back depth here as well, such as Bucky Irving, Travis Etienne. And I think that you could just pick up Jordan Mason back up off the waiver wire. And again, well, it does appear that CMC is going to be good to go this week. I mean, we were saying to sell Jordan Mason previously, but I mean, if now the cost this week is a free waiver wire pickup, I want that guy on my roster. I think that's probably the move that this team could make. I think you're in a very comfortable position. Our Debo trade was phenomenal. Our Aaron Jones trade was great. So let's go through and let's see if we can find a team that potentially needs help at running back, but has a strong tight end room. And that team potentially needs help at running back, but their tight ends aren't going to help us. This team, on the other hand, right now they have Jahmyr Gibbs, Pollard, Madison, and Emmanuel Wilson. Maybe wide receiver is what they need a little bit more. Where you look at their wide receiver room, they're currently sitting with Jalen McMillan as their wide receiver 2. I mean, this is a team that has Gabe Davis wide receiver 3, Darius Slayton wide receiver 4. So you presumably could see them getting really excited to go through and add in an additional wide receiver depth piece that we ourselves may not necessarily need. So what I think you could look to do, to be honest, is if we could potentially look to sell, say, Kyle Pitts and a wide receiver depth piece like DJ Moore to pivot over to George Kittle, I think that'd be very interesting. Kittle's already been tight end one by a decent margin so far this season. But to be completely honest, I would actually expect that that gets better considering the fact that you have the Brandon Ayuk injury and everything is just going to be funneled through Kittle and Debo going into the future. So if there was a trade to be made, I think it is going through and selling DJ Moore and Pitts to go get a tight end like George Kittle. And if you were going to backfill that open roster spot with a running back off the team, I mean, off the waiver wire, I think Jordan Mason would be the play. But instead, if you wanted to backfill that roster spot with an open wide receiver, I would go ahead and I would actually be picking up Xavier Legette. But I really appreciate you. Let me just double check. Did I hook you up with that? Yes, I hooked you up with that free start sit question and that free trade question as well. So again, if you have anything else that you want to send my way, don't hesitate to. I'd be super happy to take a look at it for you. But thank you again. I appreciate you and really hope we get to see you out in a live stream soon. Now, our next question is a start sit question coming out from Mickey. Here down in the flex, we are looking at Kittle, McMillan, Legette, Jameson, Hopkins. Obviously, we have no Kittle this week. I'm going to go ahead. I probably take Hopkins. If you were to go with somebody else, it would be Alexander Mattison. Alexander Mattison looks to have the guaranteed volume. Of course, the issue is just an absolute garbage offense. And now DK Metcalf's going to miss. So you know what? You actually have to take Metcalf out and you have to put Madison back in. And I would consider a different tight end streamer this week if Hayden Hurst is playing. Not that I expect that Hayden Hurst takes over as the starting tight end here in Los Angeles for sure, but I think Will Dissly has seen that additional flood in targets with no Hayden Hurst as well as no Quentin Johnston. Now, McQuinn coming out says, really need to survive this week before Nico is back. Down in the flex spot, we probably have to play Rachaad White here. Don't love it. Obviously, you have a decent amount of usage for Bucky Irving. While at the same time, I mean, you have I don't know. The worst matchup for any running back in fantasy going up against the Chiefs. So I think it would be a very difficult spot to play someone like Legette, to play someone like Elijah Moore instead. I mean, at least White, you do get the receiving usage out of the backfield, which does make him a little bit safer. I don't love it though. Now, Rico Simmons coming out with our next question. It's a trade where we're sending Ladd and Chase Brown for Kyren Williams. I want to be on record. Chase Brown is extremely exciting with this Zach Moss neck injury. Chase Brown very easily could be a low-end RB1. But even if Chase Brown's a low-end RB1, Kyren Williams still wins this deal here. Kyren Williams is just a different level. Now, Jordan coming out with the trade says, scared Puka will get injured and miss the playoffs. Should we move him for this? James Cook to Josh Jacobs, slight upgrade. But James Cook does have the best matchup of any running back for the playoffs. Puka Nacua to Chris Olave. If Puka's healthy, clear downgrade. I think the value falls on the Connor and Puka side, but I mean, obviously I'm operating with the same information that you are when it comes to the Puka injury. I don't have anything special. All I know is he re-aggravated it at practice. He had elite practice. And they're saying he has a shot to play this week and a shot to miss this week. So I don't want to sit here, of course, and act like I know anything substantial over the next person. Now, Luke Cage coming out with our next question. Here at running back, it looks like Tracy is a locked and loaded guy now that he clears concussion protocol. This is going to be regardless of if you have a Bigsby, Etienne healthy, regardless of the Jag situation. Going down to the flex, I think we're going to play Tank Bigsby if Etienne misses. If Etienne plays, however, you're going to go ahead and you're going to take Jacoby Myers. But obviously Mason on bye, Evans missing, and there's no way I can start Deontay Johnson his first week in Baltimore. Tommy coming out says, there's also a 10-point bonus for 110 receiving yards or 110 rushing yards, but can't combine the total yards for it, which is very good to know, which actually does kind of hurt the receiving backs. It's like in a regular fantasy football league, you go through and look at somebody like Rachaad White. Rachaad White has a shot to get to 70 rushing yards and 50 receiving yards, which is just as valuable as the running back that gets, or the receiver that gets you 120 total yards. But here with these bonuses, we're kind of more so thinking about who can pick up those big rushing statistics. So I think that is going to be Dobbins. Obviously, Dobbins doesn't have the receiving usage as a Rachaad White, but still. I mean, Dobbins is the 3-down back in a very good offense at this point. And going down to the flex spot, I think Devonta Smith is the clear play. One, I think Smith can hit this bonus. And two, I think Smith would kind of be the play regardless if the bonus existed or not. Now, Boot coming out with our next question says, I'm 6-1 and need an RB2. Is this a good trade? DJ Moore to Evan Ingram. A lateral move, kind of up to you. Bowers, Javonte to Kenneth Walker. I do view Bowers as a top 3 tight end rest of season. I view Walker as a mid RB1. I view Javonte as a low end RB2. Can y'all let me know in the live chat at this point? What side would you rather have? Would you rather have Javonte Williams, DJ Moore, and Brock Bowers, or Kenneth Walker and Evan Ingram? For me, I mean, you have the injury to both Christian Kirk as well as the secondary. I mean, I don't want to say the secondary receivers, but the other receivers that are left are banged up with Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis. So I think Evan Ingram is exciting here. Walker. Waka. So it looks like everybody else is on the Walker Ingram side as well. So I think it looks like a good deal. Walker is definitely by far and away the best player in it. Now, Ben Dog coming out says, won't let me add, but he gets a 2025 second rounder. I'd rather have Waddle, to be honest. It looks like if this is filled out correctly, where it honestly doesn't even matter. It's a second, it's not a first. I know maybe I'm just a hater, but I feel like this Tillman situation is very reminiscent of, Tillman situation is very reminiscent of like the Trey Tucker situation earlier in the year. You can see receivers in the NFL. It happens constantly. Go out there and pop off for 2 games with 20 plus points. But when you're looking at Waddle, it's a top 10 NFL draft pick that does it over a large sample. That gets the big new large contracts. And I don't think a second round pick's bridging the gap for me. I'd rather have Waddle. Now, Braden Nelson coming out with our next question. We're trading away A.J. Brown Chase for Taylor Achane, and Metcalf. So A.J. Brown and Chase clear downgraded Jonathan Taylor and Achane. We get Metcalf in return. Running back, we're sitting with Barkley, CMC, right, and Kyron Williams right now. Wide receiver, we would have St. Brown. Our wide receiver 2 would be Ricky Pearsall. I think you're doing too much here. If I'm reading this correctly, where we have Barkley, CMC, and Kyron Williams at running back, why the hell are we trading away A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase for a couple of additional RBs? I think you're trying too much. I think you already have the best team in the league by far, and I think you just got to let it ride. Okay, so now going over to our next question. This is coming out from Josh with a J. This is a trade where we're sending Najee Mooney Kittle for Achane Tyreek. Oh, this is Achane Tyreek, not even remotely close. And I want to be on record. Kittle's the tight end 1 rest of season. He's been the top tight end so far in fantasy this year. Plus, at the same time, it makes him more exciting, the fact that you don't have Achane rest of season. Like, Kittle's an absolute crusher. But this is like Miami prices back when people thought Tua was going to be done forever. Now, you 100% go with Achane Tyreek. Now, Alley-oop coming out says Pitts or Dobbs for the flex. Now that things are trending in the direction that you should have Jordan Love in an environment in which we know that the Packers are probably going to throw the ball to keep up. Historically, you're not able to run against the Lions anyway this season. I think you're going to go through and I think you're going to take Romeo Dobbs over Kyle Pitts for the flex. Now, obviously, in terms of the raw value these guys have rest of season, I'd rather have Pitts just because the positional edge you get at tight end in comparison to receiver. But Mr. B coming out says, need to upgrade at quarterback, but don't know how we should do it. Kyron to Chase. Lateral move, up to you. St. Brown to Allen, clear downgrade. I think you're doing too much. Here's what we could do. This side, you definitely lose. You want the Purdy, Kyron, St. Brown side. If you wanted to downgrade from Kyron to upgrade at quarterback, Purdy, Kyron for Allen, Chase would be the deal. If you could do this, let's go for it. But to also include Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think it's just way too much. I mean, Purdy also looks like a top 10 QB rest of season. Now, H123 coming out with our next question. Quarterback, we are going to go Love over Kyler. Great matchup. Obviously, we need to confirm that Love will be good to go, but as things stand right now, reports are saying that he is trending towards playing. Running back, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take Gibbs as well as Chase Brown. Brown, an absolute must-start running back. With no Zach Moss this week. You could very easily rank him as an RB1 if you wanted to. Going over to wide receiver, Chase, obviously locked and loaded every week. Reed is that easy play as well, now that it seems like you will have Love. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to take Josh down since he has Flacco under center. Now, Pedro coming out with our next question says, just made these 2 new additions, Brown and Ingram. We need some help. So this is tough. I probably go with St. Brown over London. London's in a great game environment, though. Going over to tight ends, I will play Evan Ingram with all the injuries that you have in Jacksonville to that wide receiver core. I'm going to go Drake London over Chase Brown, but it's honestly relatively close. And yeah, you just have an insane team here. Now, Nixio coming out says CMC next week. Other running backs are Dobbins, and receiver we have Waddle and Worthy. Higgins to Devonta Smith, clear upgrade. Tracy and Singletary for Brian Thomas and Dowdle. Give me Brian Thomas and Dowdle. So yeah, we're going to go with the Brian Thomas, Devonta Smith, and Rico Dowdle side. A lot more confident in getting the games played from Brian Thomas Jr. rest of season than we should be from T. Higgins at this point. So yeah, kind of easily the receivers in this. Now, Dylan coming out with the trade. This is Najee, Dowdle, Waddle versus Benson, Connor, Evans. Waddle to Evans depends on your situation. It appears that Evans should crush Waddle rest of season from a points per game perspective, but he should get an extra 3 games played from Waddle in comparison to Evans. Going from Najee Harris to James Conner, it's a clear upgrade. Looking at what you have with Dowdle to Trey Benson, who cares? I'd rather have Dowdle, but it's not going to move us too much. If you were a playoff team, I think you can go with Conner and Evans. Conner is the number 1 schedule of any running back in the playoffs. And obviously, Evans with no Godwin can project out easily to be a top 10 option there. Now, Trevor coming out with our next question says, Flex, I'm thinking Tracy or Downs. What are you thinking? I think it's going to be tough. Yeah, Dobbins, you have to get in over Tracy in my mind based off their respective offenses. Wide receiver, you have to play Kupp. You have to play Neighbors. Down in the flex, I think we probably just go ahead, take the running back that has the guaranteed volume. It's a bad offense, but I can't sit here and say the Colts are a great offense. Obviously, the Colts are going to be a much better offense now that they get Flacco instead of Richardson. But it's not like they're the Chiefs. So we're going to go with Tracy. Now, Poker Ace 23 coming out. This is Montgomery Puka versus Taylor and Olave. It is extremely difficult to evaluate Puka Nacua right now. Where if we are looking at Puka, I wanted to put him as a mid-wide receiver 1 rest of season when the man gives you almost 20 points in a game where he only plays 57% of the snaps. But now you re-aggravate the knee. It's the same knee. They're saying he has a chance to play. Who knows what is going to happen? Montgomery to Taylor is a clear upgrade. I have no idea. I legitimately have no idea. The thing is, even if Puka, like hypothetically, Puka misses just this 1 week and then's back after that, he still plays the same amount of games as Olave. Olave has to deal with his flex in week 12. Puka's already through it. Montgomery's through his flex comparison to Taylor, where you had the flex in week 14. Can y'all please spam the chat? What side are you going with here? Are you going to be going with Puka Nacua and David Montgomery, or are you going to go with Chris Olave and Jonathan Taylor? Are you going with Puka and Montgomery or JT and Taylor? We got Puka, Taylor, 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 Puka, Puka, Taylor, Taylor, Puka, Taylor, Taylor. It does look like the majority of the people are on the Taylor side. Again, I would have no idea how to go through and value Puka if I had him. Now, Night Train says, for the flex, Amari, Flowers, Hopkins, Waddle, or Rico. Okay, let's look at this. If we were to get anybody else in here, it would be Waddle for me. Can we see what the underdog picks are on this? Amari, 48.5 receiving yards. Waddle, 51.5. Probably a more touchdown upside in Buffalo. They're favored by like 8.5 points here. I pulled up my flex rankings. I literally have Waddle 36, Amari 37. We have them literally back to back. So I think it's your personal preference. I probably go ahead and take Waddle over Amari. But It is legitimately up to you. Okay, but let's go ahead and let's refresh this real quick. Now, this is a free team review coming out from Real B Die. It says, Mason, I'm 4-4 with the best team according to the team rankings. However, my team is super inconsistent when it comes to scoring week to week. Are there any moves we should make before the deadline, or should we ride with this team and hope for more consistency as we go through? Thanks. Thank you. It is really funny looking at this in the League Analyzer, where you have that top team. You have pretty much two juggernauts. Then you have a group of 3 teams that are about the same. Then you have a group of 5 teams which are all almost identical. And then you have 2 teams at the bottom. Like, I'll show you what my league looks like with the League Analyzer. Let me go over to the My Teams page. Come on, baby. Okay, so you can see my league is very much, you got the 2 juggernauts and then just a steady decline down to the garbage team at the very bottom. So it's funny when you get to see the League Analyzer and it's like, oh no, it's instead just grouped off like tier by tier in a way. It's like a tier list. But anyway, it's a 12-team league in which you can start up to 4 receivers weekly. So depth does matter in this format, where obviously there are others in which it doesn't. Here, quarterback, we are rolling with Josh Allen. You're able to start Allen every single week, regardless of the matchup. If you wanted to roster another QB, I'm not going to fault you for it. Obviously, you are in a situation in which Allen does have the Week 12 bye, so you would have to cover for that. Drake May has the Week 14 bye, so you could play May then, but it'd be the only time you ever play May. So it's just kind of up to you. Your options on the waiver wire aren't exactly phenomenal, so I'm not going to fault you at all for rostering 2 QBs. Now, going over to what we have at running back. You are currently sitting with Barkley Kyron. So we have 2 top 10 running backs rest of season. 2 guys that you can be extremely excited about. Sorry, Barkley Walker. I can't read. But same things remain true. But it's a league in which, like we discussed, you can get those extra flexes in. So the depth does matter here. And you have Dobbins, who's taken over as that 3-down player in Los Angeles. We have Etienne, Charbonnet, Vidal, who all have their own respective upside cases. A pivot I would personally make is I would probably go ahead and I would probably cut Vidal and pick up a running back that we know if you were to get an injury to the guy in front of him, we can go ahead and start him. Like, I understand that we have Dobbins here, but even if Dobbins were to go down, do you put Vidal into your starting lineup? I don't know. Vidal hasn't proven anything. Could very easily be a running back by committee. Where I know for a fact, based on what we saw previously in Buffalo, where if James Cook gets injured again, you can go through and you can confidently start Ray Davis. So that I think I would cut Vidal for Davis in particular. Going over to what you have at wide receiver, we are sitting with Tyreek and Neighbors. So we have 2 top 10 wide receivers rest of season. Super confident in saying that. The wide receiver depth pieces here matter a bit because what we were talking about with the league settings. DJ Moore, George Pickens are both viable names. We have Xavier Worthy as a wide receiver 5. This is a phenomenal wide receiver room. Going over to tight end, we have the elite tight end with McBride. This is a phenomenal team. There's nothing you need to do with this team. I hate to say it. I mean, realistically speaking, the waiver wire is not great either, so it's not like 2-for-1 deals are an absolute no-brainer. I mean, if you were to go through and if you were to do anything, if you can get somebody to pay a premium for your depth just because we have so much of it, you could afford to go get like an elite flex. Like if you're able to potentially go ahead and package together Pickens and Dobbins and go get an elite RB for the flex or an elite receiver. It'd probably be easier to tier up at wide receiver just because there will be those teams that are desperate at RB. The issue is like a team falls to 1-7 and like I want to say, oh, let's go make a trade with this team. We can come up with something that's a win-win. But at the same time, it's like, oh, okay, well, realistically speaking, are they just checked out of the league entirely? But I mean, if you could go out there and make that 2-for-1 deal and go pivot over to CMC and get back McCaffrey next week, I mean, I think you're a team that you have enough depth where you can afford to take on that risk to get that upside. Another team that potentially needs help at running back, that team should be fine. This team has Rachaad White, RB2, Zach Moss, RB3. So, I mean, if you wanted to go through and try to send them like Dobbins and George Pickens to go get Cooper Kupp, I think it'd be a no-brainer. I mean, obviously, it's much easier said than done. I think it'd be impossible if you're playing in a league in which you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex in a 10-team format for us to be able to pull that off. But specifically in your league, is there a chance that you could get that done? Going over to another team that potentially needs help at running back. This team has Raheem Mostert as their RB3. Now, obviously, if we could make that deal for St. Brown, we would as well, but much easier said than done again. Overall, you're the number 1 team in the league analyzer. I know you're only 4-4, but to be honest with you, I think you've probably just been getting a little unlucky. I think that the team's going to be great going into the future. I don't think you should really be hesitant at all with it. And yeah, I really wish I had more for you here. I really wish that we had some big takeaway. I think you have the number 1 team in the league. I don't think it's that close either. I think you just sit on your hands unless somebody's willing to go out there and dramatically overpay for some depth, which obviously we came up with a couple of those examples of what that would look like. But Bodie coming out with our next question says, thoughts on this trade, or would you change something around, or do you like the current team? So I will say in general, I'll say it. I hate deals like this. Deals where we're sending 5 guys, getting 4 guys. We're swapping half our teams with them. It's like, realistically speaking, how does this turn into a win-win trade? Like, typically when we're looking at trades, we're trying to come up with something that could be a win for both parties. Obviously, there'll be, that's never really the case. A lot of times you look back a month from now and you go, oh, Brandon and I got hurt. This team won dramatically. But if it's a deal like this, you're just throwing so much risk into it. Terry McLaurin versus Devontae Adams. Give me Devontae Adams. Romeo Doubs to Josh Downs. Give me Josh Downs. Breece Hall to Saquon Barkley. Give me Saquon Barkley. Kenneth Walker to CMC. Give me Kenneth Walker. I'd probably go with the Barkley, CMC, Devontae Adams side. If they're willing to do it. But again, I don't see how the other team wins this unless CMC doesn't play. If CMC doesn't play, then obviously they're screwing you over. But if he does, I think you're in a really good spot. Okay. So let's move this over to our next question. This one coming out from Bodie again says, thoughts on this trade? Would you change anything, or do you think the team is good as is? I'm sorry that you sent this in twice, my guy. Let me hook you up with a free trade question. So you have a free trade voucher. That way, next time you send something in my way, it's free. But never think that, oh, Mason missed my question, I need to send in something again. I promise you I'm always going to be able to answer it. You just got to maybe give me a little bit of time. We just go in order. So never think that I missed your question. Never think that you got to send something in again. I'm going to get to it. And if I hadn't yet, just wait a little bit. But yeah, I'm sorry. I just sent you that free trade voucher, though. So next question you send in should be free. Now, Not Shook coming out with our next one says, got this offer today. Not sure I need to make the trade. What are your thoughts based on the team? Looking at the team, running back would be leftover Kyron CMC. Wide receiver, we have Metcalf injured. We have Evans injured. We have Ladd and Downs as the two guys we're going with right now. For me, I think the player I would prefer is Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, with Gibbs, you're just taking on no risk, really. Nico definitely has more risk, where you are going to get the extra 2 games at the very minimum for Gibbs. That's assuming Nico comes back the first chance he can. But Gibbs has already gone through the week 5 bye. So I would rather have Gibbs if the other person was willing to throw in another piece. Like, they were also willing to give you Brian Thomas in return for, like, Josh Downs. Then at that point, we go with the Nico side. I like Nico as the buy low candidate. The thing is, you're just paying the price tag of a high-end RB1 that you're going to get 2 extra games out of. Where, like you said, we really don't need to do that. Now, Bobby Baloney coming out with our next question says, getting ahead, Carr at Atlanta, Flacco at Buffalo, Russ at Washington, week 10. I'd probably go Russ at Washington week 10 if we had to choose someone. But again, I don't think that there's like such a massive gap that means you need to roster Russ this week. So the reality is, I think you just honestly reevaluate going into next week, because I wouldn't want to go out there and make some dramatic changes with our roster now. Levi says, no bites on Kelsey all year. Feel like we need depth. Oh, this is not even a role. This is Travis Kelce by a mile. Unless this was a dynasty team, this is Travis Kelce by a freaking mile, my friend. I know it may be frustrating if you've been trying to sell Travis Kelce and nobody's been paying you anything for him, but post Rashee Rice injury, Travis Kelce is a locked and loaded top 5 tight end rest of season with very little to no hesitation. Like, I don't know how you couldn't go with Kelce here. Like, I have Eckler in the Flock League. And Eckler's the guy that I consider dropping every single week. Just got to go, how the hell do I ever get this guy into my starting lineup? Now, going over to our next question. This one's coming out from David. This is 81 out of 100 fab. League says collusion. I would rather have the Derrick Henry side. I don't think it's collusion by any means. I'm viewing Evans as a mid-wide receiver 1 when he is back, but obviously he won't be back until presumably week 12. Amari is a mid-wide receiver 2. Nick Chubb is a low-end RB2, high-end RB3. But, I mean, Derrick Henry at this point is a locked and loaded top 3 RB every single week. So I think it would be difficult to pivot off of Henry here regardless. Okay, so moving this over to our next question. This one coming out from Vex Dots. Here down in the flex, this is a dynasty league, so we should have a ton of options to choose from. Options that stand out immediately: DeAndre Hopkins, Tyrone Tracy, and that's about it, even if Etienne does play. You lock in Tracy here. I mean, Tracy clearing concussion protocol. Honestly, I'm very surprised by it. I mean, I was completely wrong with this. I thought, oh, okay, he sees the suspension on a Monday. That means he's going to be missing this week. Let's look how safe they played it with neighbors. Completely off base. Tracy's good to go. It's a good matchup as well here going up against Washington. So I think you lock him in, and he has the guaranteed workload. Now, Gavin coming out with a start sit says, I love Sam Darnold, and I think Downs going to pop off. I have Sam Darnold. You go ahead and you play Jordan Love. Love's good to go. I mean, if you are looking at Jordan Love, Love is a QB in which he probably has to throw the ball to keep up with Detroit, while at the same time Detroit is a team that you would typically not be able to run against. So I think the passing volume's there in Green Bay this week. Running back Gibbs, we lock in. Wide receiver London, St. Brown must start options. Tight end, we go Evan Ingram with all the injuries in Jacksonville. Down in the flex, it really comes to Downs, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle. If you love Josh Downs, I'm not going to fault you for going Josh Downs at all. Obviously, he's been incredible. I mean, the man's going out there pretty much averaging 20 points per game in games in which Joe Flacco plays. And you have an environment where he's going up against Minnesota, which has allowed a ridiculous amount of points to opposing wide receivers. So I think with that in mind, you could go Josh Downs. I'm not going to fault you if you wanted to go Waddle, though. Now, Bobby coming out says, Card Atlanta. We already answered this, my friend. Again, I do want to reiterate, I'm never going to miss any of your questions. If you think, oh, Mason didn't get to my question, I need to ask it again. I promise you I'm going to. You may just have to give me a little bit of time. But yeah, let me go ahead and hook you up with a free start set question. That way, next time you send something in, it is free, my friend. At least if it's a start set. But Flip Flop says, need an RB2. AJ Brown and Lamb start. Should we trade Waddle? If you desperately need an RB2, we have AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb on the team, both already through the bye week as well. 100%, I think you could afford to go through and you could afford to sell Jalen Waddle for Chase Brown. I don't know if I'd be saying this if it wasn't for the fact that you end up getting the Zach Moss injury, of course. But post Zach Moss injury, I mean, Chase Brown looks to be that low-end RB1, high-end RB2. Now, Dr. Lufa coming out with our next question. Here for the flex, it's HN or Neighbors. Dear God. Can y'all spam the chat? Who are y'all going to go with? Neighbors currently leading the NFL in targets per game at the wide receiver position. HN currently averaging like 25 points a game when you have Tua playing. Probably end up going with HN for that reason. Chad says HN, Neighbors, Neighbors, HN, Neighbors. The real answer is you can't go wrong here. The offenses actually project very similarly this week, which typically is not the case. But you do get an implied team total of 20 points here for New York against Washington. They're telling us it should be a better offense than we're used to. So maybe we go ahead and take Neighbors. I don't know if I love it, though. Now, Amonson says, what are your thoughts? I've been riddled with wide receiver injuries this year. I have good running back depth. Dobbins, Chuba, and Brown. Jerry Jeudy's a 0, by the way. I would rather have Javonte over Hopkins. I don't mind you at all making a deal like this. All I would ask is, could we not squeeze out a little more value? I'd try to squeeze a little more value if possible. Hi, Mason, coming out with a trade question. This is Brooks, Dobbs, Laporta versus Reed, Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is an absolute 0 in this. Who do we have at tight end right now? We have both Kraft and Kate Otten, so we're just trying to sell any of these guys that we can. I think the value lies on the side with Brooks, Dobbs, and Laporta. Could we just get a slightly more appealing player here? If you can get Josh Downs, then we can go with it. But I mean, realistically speaking, you look at the target volume. I know Reed's the more dynamic and explosive player. But I don't know how large the gap is exactly between Dobbs and Reed. Okay. Yes, I'm going to go. If we can get Downs, I'm for sure doing it. Now, Yang coming out says, stuck between my quarterback and flex. Big fan. Love the flock. Appreciate you, my guy. Looking at this, we are going to go ahead. I probably go Baker. He'll run the ball a little bit more than Tua. I'm definitely not excited about Baker this week. Right now, sportsbooks are putting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as one of the worst offenses in the league in a really tough matchup going up against KC. Going down to the flex, you have no Metcalf, so I'm going to go Stevenson. Stevenson's been great in the games in which you have a considerable amount of leeway with this Patriots offense. Like if the Patriots win the game, or even in the game that they went to overtime against Seattle, you had a phenomenal performance for Ramadre. But I mean, if they just get boat raced, then you're screwed with Ramadre. But against the Titans, obviously, while the Titans may be favored, there's still a good shot that New England could win. Now, Johnsky coming out with our next question. Says, I have Harrison, Devontae, Smitty, Kupp, Hopkins. My running back 2, Najee, Bucky, Brooks. My RB1's Bijan. Is it worth it? If this is not a linked team, so I can't tell if the league settings are correct. If this is like a 10-team league where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, then we will just go ahead and we will take Brian Robinson because it looks like the wide receiver depth's not going to be important for us. However, if instead this was a league where I don't know, maybe you were forced to go through and start 3 receivers and 2 flex spots, then obviously at that point, Ladd McConkey does become much more appealing. So I think it really does come down to the league settings here. Now, JT Rob coming out says, I'm rolling 7-1 and feel like we want an upgrade at running back. Hell yeah, congrats on being 7-1. I think you could very easily go Barkley. Obviously, if you're looking at what you have with the Jalen Hurts rushing touchdowns as of late, it's maybe been a little bit frustrating with Saquon Barkley. But going into the future here, I do still think that you are in a phenomenal spot where there is really not much to worry about. When it comes to Barkley, you have the receiving usage. You have everything when it comes to the really touches between the tackles as well. The only thing that is maybe a little frustrating here, of course, is Jalen Hurts stealing some of those rushing touchdowns. But it's great offense where there are plenty of touchdowns to go around anyway. Now, Eli Davis coming out with a massive dono. Really appreciate you. Let me hook you up with a free trade question here, my friend. Says, watching the Jets last night really put me off Brees and their offense, even though they won. What are your thoughts? Am I overpaying? Am I overreacting to Brees? So Goff doesn't really have value here, right? If you're looking at Goff, this is a quarterback in which I would compare him primarily just to a streaming option. He'd be a phenomenal streamer, but I don't necessarily want to come out here and act like he is much, much more than that. Brees to Kyron's a clear upgrade. It's just like, does Harrison make sense to move off of? It's a 12-team format. I mean, if we could keep Harrison and send a lesser receiver, because it's not like our wide receiver depth's phenomenal either. If you could send Worthy, then sure, let's go ahead and let's make this pivot. I do think that Harrison's probably a little bit too much, though. But, I mean, if you were pivoting off of Brees, maybe to Kyron. You do get the extra game played as well, where Kyron went through the bye in week 6. Brees had it week 12. Now, Lord's Child coming out with the trade says 2 and 5. Neighbors wide receiver 1. Brees, Brian Robinson Jr., Tracy are the running backs. We have Downs and Myers at depth at wide receiver. So 2 and 5, I'd say typically you're in a spot in which you can't be going out there and buying somebody like Nico, where you have him out this week. He's out week 14 as well. But you can say Metcalf's out this week, Metcalf's out next week. Because we have Tracy hitting off the waiver wire, I do think you could go Nico Collins if you really want to. But I don't know if you want to be pivoting off of Montgomery. I don't love it, but I do think you could go Nico. I'd be a lot more excited about it if we had a winning record. But let me refresh this. I don't think we have too many more questions to go through here. But we have 9 more questions in the tank. A Boogie coming out. Always happy to see you, my friend. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free sit question here too. It says, hey, any moves I should try to be making before the deadline this Sunday? Okay, so your trade deadline is early. Good to know here. But anyway, right now we are chase the money. We are second in the league analyzer, which is nice to see. It does appear that there is that juggernaut team at the very top. We are 6-2. This is a 10-team league in which you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. So 10-team league where you only start 2 receivers and a flex. You are in a situation in which it probably does make sense to sell wide receiver depth pieces to go get upgrades inside the starting lineup if possible. Starting off at the quarterback position, you currently are sitting with Kyler Murray, a quarterback that we can start most weeks, right? In that you do have the rushing upside. Cousins, I'm fine holding on to because you have the week 11 bye for Kyler. And I could see specific game environments, maybe like this week, where if you really wanted to pivot to Cousins, who has a much better matchup than Kyler Murray, I wouldn't fault you for it. Going over to what we have at running back, you're looking at 2 locked and loaded RB1s rest of season in a full PPR league with Gibbs, Achane. Both already through their bye week as well. But we still have Jacobs as an extremely high quality flex slash potential fill-in if you were to get an injury to either Gibbs or Achane. Going over to wide receiver, it does suck that we had the Puka injury, but if Puka's fully healthy, we have 3 wide receivers who can be super excited about starting every week with Chase, Puka, Olave. So honestly, a couple different pivots I'd make with this team. When we look at the wide receiver depth at the very bottom, how things sit, there is absolutely there's a 0% chance you're ever getting Cedric Tillman into your starting lineup. There's a 0% chance you're ever getting Jalen McMillan into your starting lineup. Now, with that being said, does that mean we need to go out there and try to trade Jalen McMillan, trade Cedric Tillman? Probably not, because if we are realistic about this, realistically speaking, I don't think we can expect to get any value for them. Whereas I think if you were to instead look to maybe sell off of Ladd McConkey, Ladd's a player that we don't particularly need given the fact that we have this much depth. And I do think you could get a lot for. Now, of course, the question is, okay, well, how are we going to go through? What are we going to make a move to be? There are a couple different options you could have. I think one thing we could look to do is obviously you could look to sell Ladd and just pivot over to a receiver that you have a little bit more upside for in the fantasy football playoffs, even if he's injured. Like if you wanted to trade Ladd and go get T. Higgins, if you wanted to go ahead and pivot from, say, Ladd and another smaller piece such as Jalen McMillan, or where you sell Ladd and Tillman to go get DK Metcalf, I think that could be a possibility. Same thing with Deontay Johnson in that 2-for-1 deal. Or another thing you could look to do is try to take that wide receiver depth piece such as Ladd or Deontay with Kyler and go get that true elite level quarterback off the waiver wire. For me, I think that's what I would look to do personally, in that you don't really need to prioritize the depth here at wide receiver in this format. We have the elite running backs. We have the wide receivers at the very top that we are extremely excited about. For me, I think I could say that you can relatively easily afford to go out there and get that elite level quarterback with no hesitation. So that's what I would do personally, but I really appreciate you, of course, and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. And I did hook you up with that free start sit question and that free trade question as well. So if you have any trades that come to mind that you want to send my way, don't hesitate to. Now, going over to our next one, coming out from JT Rob says, I'm 7-1. We just answered this for you, my guy. Let me hook you up with another free trade question. Again, I want to remind everybody, I'll never miss any of your questions. I just go in order. So if you asked it and went, hey, he hasn't answered my question, it's been 20 minutes, let me ask it again. I promise you I'm going to get to it. Don't worry for it. So let me hook you up with a free trade question. I'll hook you up with a free start sit question as well. I'm sorry about that. Just never think I missed your question. I promise you I'm going to get to it. But yeah, if you really needed a running back, I think you can go for Barkley instead of Lamb. Hellboy Jordan, always happy to see you, of course. Always out here. Let me get you a trade question. Let me get you a start sit question as well. This is C Mac and Cheese. Says, hey Mason, I've been dropping the league analyzer lately. We just traded Amari, Rome, Moss for Moore and White due to bye weeks. Looks great post Moss news. My wide receiver room is taking a hit. Plus my overall depth isn't great. Any advice what to do next? Thanks, my guy. Thank you. Honestly, I probably need to go through and update the rest of season rankings with the Cincinnati Bengals running back news that we have, that Zach Moss is dealing with the neck injury. We need to move Moss down. We need to be moving up Chase Brown. But if you were able to get out of Moss, I think that's a great idea. Now, this is that league where the top 6 teams are all relatively close. We are currently sitting at number 5 if we were looking at the league analyzer. This is a league where we don't have that record. We've looked at this previously. Instead, we are just looking at total points. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, 12-team format, so wide receiver depth is going to be super important. So Spears is ruled out. Tony Pollard may play. If you wanted to drop Julius Chestnut and potentially, if Pollard is cleared and good to go, and go pick up a wide receiver depth piece like Leggett, I do see the path towards Leggett being viable, even if this is only a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. I mean, obviously, you have a just completely wide open depth chart here. You have the round 1 NFL draft capital. He's flashed early in this season, too. If you want to hold on to Chestnut and wait until you get Pollard confirmation, I'm not going to fault you for it. I'm looking at quarterback. We are elite. We have Lamar. I mean, this is why we are currently 3rd in this league in total points. I mean, we're in a really comfortable spot. Trying to think if there's anything that we could possibly say here. I mean, we're rostering Stafford as well. Of course, Lamar does have the bye week in week 14, so I don't fault you for rostering 2 quarterbacks. At the same time, there are a couple of QBs out there on the waiver wire. So if there was a player like Leggett, for me personally in my league, I would drop Matthew Stafford, and I would go pick up Leggett instead. Now, going over to running back, we're looking at Breece Hall, CMC. So this is a league where we have the fantasy football playoffs, even if it is total points. So CMC presumably can be a running back one during the fantasy football playoff stretch. Breece obviously disappointing this past week, but it was a tough matchup. I still do think that Breece is an RB1 rest of season. Now, is he the RB2 coming into the year? I had Breece at RB2. I had CMC at RB1 overall. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case, but still, two running backs I'm very excited to build around. We have Rachaad White as a quality depth piece here at RB, where we kind of need that running back depth in the short term until we get CMC back in. I do think that in general, Rachaad White could potentially be a nice sell high candidate. Going over to wide receiver, obviously we have Neighbors as a player in which I don't know, he's leading the NFL in targets per game at the wide receiver position. We can be extremely excited about it. Tight end, we have Kincaid and Hawkinson. If CMC was through the bye week and we knew CMC was going to be producing, what I would potentially want to be doing is throwing together a deal where we send Rachaad White and Kincaid and get a true elite tight end to try to get up to the Travis Kelce range, especially in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. But the issue is obviously we don't have the confirmation with CMC just yet. Jordan Mason dealing with the shoulder injury. Wide receiver role, and I think you made a great call, of course, getting out of Zach Moss. Looks like you did so at the exact right time. I think really the only thing that I could say is what I would do personally with the squad is I would drop Stafford. I would pick up Leggett. If Pollard is back in, then at that point, I'm going to drop Chestnut and I'm going to pick up somebody like Isaac Garindo as well. But I'm sorry, I don't think I have anything else with your team. I think your team's third it's great for reasons. Third in the league with CMC on it. Waddle should be better going into the future. DJ Moore has seen the value fall. So I think it's probably too late to sell DJ Moore. So yeah, great team. I wish I had more for you. Again, thank you so much, my guy. I know you've been with us for a ridiculous amount of time now. I really appreciate you. And I know we're sitting here silent thinking, but I think you've already structured your team how we'd want it, specifically in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. Now, moving this over to our next question. This one coming out from Samuel. It says, what it do, Mason? Been a fan since 2021, and I've scored the most points in my league so far. I'm very weak at running back. Just proposed a trade for Brian Thomas Jr. to receive James Conner. Not sure if they'll accept any suggestions. Really appreciate you again. Thank you so much. Let me hook you up with both a free start sit question as well as a free trade question too here. We are BD in the League Analyzer. So League Analyzer, you have 3 teams that are completely, or 4 teams that are completely dead here at the bottom. And we are second, so we are in a really good spot. You're saying that our weak spot is running back. We can see that we are 9th in the League Analyzer at RB. Looking at this, it is a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. So obviously the elite wide receivers still hold a tremendous amount of value. Now, the issue that you're going to have, of course, is while the elite receivers still matter, the wide receiver depth doesn't in this league. So going through and looking at names such as Puka Nacua, such as Nico Collins, it is a little frustrating to see them specifically on the team because it may be a little bit difficult to actually get the value that we are wanting for these depth wide receivers right now. Because long term, when everybody is healthy, Jefferson, Nico, Puka, you presumably have 3 top-end wide receiver ones that you can be extremely excited to start every single week. And looking at Brian Thomas Jr., Josh Downs, they're phenomenal wide receivers rest of season here. But at the same time, we don't necessarily need their depth. So I think long-term, the very easy play with this roster is we're going to go ahead. We're going to take Josh Downs. We're going to send him with Pollard to get the best running back we can in return. We're going to take Brian Thomas. We're going to send him with Najee Harris and get the best running back that we can in return. But in terms of what we are doing in the short term with this team, Najee Harris is on bye. George Kittle's on bye. Nico Collins is out this week. Brian Thomas Jr. could potentially be out this week. So in terms of what we have in the short term, you're probably in a spot in which you can't afford to go through and look to sell those wide receiver depth pieces just because you need to hold on to them for right now. But we have the elite quarterback with Lamar. And going over to tight end, we have the number one quarterback. We have the number one tight end in the league. If you wanted to pivot from Taysom to Gesicki this week, since you have no T. Higgins in this game, I'm not going to fault you for that. I just think that you probably end up getting more targets in the direction of Gesicki now with no Higgins. Going over at running back, I mean, we have the guaranteed touches. We have guys with a high floor. The issue is just the ceiling doesn't really exist. So, I mean, as soon as we get past this week, and obviously George Kittle's back to somebody that we are starting every single week, regardless of what the matchup is, I think you probably go ahead, drop Taysom Hill, pick up a player like Rico Dowdle off the waiver wire. I would love to pick up Dowdle now. Just the issue is, like, presumably, who could we drop? The worst receiver we have is Downs. The worst running back we have is Bigsby. I don't necessarily think you have to drop either. We definitely don't drop Downs for him. I don't think you have to drop Bigsby for him. So, yeah, for me, the play is we're going to go ahead after this week. We try to sell Downs and or Brian Thomas Jr. in a 2-for-1 deal for the best running backs we can potentially get. After this week, we cut Taysom or whatever tight end we decide to play. I think you could consider Gesicki, given the update that we have with T. Higgins. And we pick up an additional running back upside piece like Rico Dowdle down there on the waiver wire. But with all the injuries in the bye weeks that you have right now, the issue is you probably can't go through and look to make that pivot right this second, where we are going to be having to wait just a little bit of time. But I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way. Obviously, another thing with the 7-1 team is we are wanting to go through and we are wanting to pivot off of short-term production for long-term upside and go out there and get some of those injured players you could potentially snag at a discount. But you can make an argument, we already have those guys. We already have Nico Collins on this team. We already have Puka Nacua on this team. We already have Brian Thomas Jr. on this team. So I think you've already done a phenomenal job setting up this team almost exactly how we would want it. But I really do appreciate you. Again, I hooked you up with that free start sit question and that free trade question. So if you had any other things that you wanted to know about this team, don't hesitate and send it over my direction. But you're 7-1 for a reason. I think you're in a really good spot. Now let's move this over to our next question coming up from Johnny. Says, 2 weeks ago, no vouchers. I sent several emails. Did you send emails to Mason Dodd at flockfantasy.com? Mason, M-A-S-O-N, Dodd, D-O-D-D, at flockfantasy.com. I promise you I'm responding to emails, my friend. I promise you we are going through and we have done, probably 1,000 free team reviews in the live stream. I've responded to maybe 200 emails about this. But if you made that deposit on Underdog Fantasy 2 weeks ago, the voucher isn't going to magically show up. You definitely have to shoot me and get in contact with me with that email, and I can go ahead and help you out, my guy. But please shoot me an email again. I do have the 50-mile ultra marathon, so I'm sorry. I probably won't be responding to your email tomorrow, to be completely honest with you. But hopefully I can get to it on Sunday. But I am sorry about that. And again, please just email me. I promise you, if you email me, I'm going to respond. I don't think I'm sure there have been emails that I've never responded to. But emails regarding that subject, there haven't been. But anyway, let me move this over to our next question. Coming over from LP Cabrera, longtime member of the flock. Going to be excited to check this out for you. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free start sit question as well, just in case there's anything else you want to send my way about this. Said I'm 4-4 and was offered and was ahead in the league analyzer last week. Anything we can do now to get a hold? We are a hope and a dream. We are now down to the 2 spot in the league analyzer. I wonder why that happened. Did the team at 1 have anybody dramatically move up? I don't know. What did the team at 1 make it? Maybe they made a trade or something. But anyway, we are 4-4, but we have a phenomenal team, right? Typically 4-4 roster, you'd go, okay, we kind of need to focus in on getting points in this lineup right this second, yada, yada, yada. No, here you're in a situation in which I do think, I know maybe it's aggressive to say this, but I do think you can kind of sit here and think about the fantasy football playoff upside that we have. Of course, we'll go by this one by one. Looking at quarterback, we're weak, right? I think C.J. Stroud's going to be a lot better going to the future than he has been. But at the same time, with that being said, he still doesn't have much rushing upside. Well, you are going to get Nico Collins back in. It's not like you're going to see Stephon Diggs coming back in at any point here. So I do think we need to lower expectations on Stroud in comparison to where they previously were. And in a 10-team league in which you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, I would love to go upgrade over Stroud if possible. I mean, we have so many assets here at running back and wide receiver that we can play around with. Plan A, of course, would be, I mean, if you could potentially go through and look to move off of, say, Amari Cooper or Ladd McConkey with C.J. Stroud and go get that top-end quarterback. Go get that option like Josh Allen. Go get that option like Jaden Daniels. I think it would be an absolute no-brainer. Now, the issue is it's a 10-team league. It's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. So the reality, nobody's going to need help at wide receiver, right? Realistically, is if you were wanting to make a move here, what you're probably going to need to do is you would probably need to actually look to sell the running back position because we could presumably find a team that actually needs help at our RB, at their RB slot. Going through and looking at this team here, they don't have any quarterback. That'd be interesting for us. This team is Bigsby RB3. I mean, they have Lamar. If we could somehow go out there and quote unquote overpay for Lamar Jackson, I would, especially with your league settings here. Like, if you could send like Brian Robinson, Amari Cooper, and C.J. Stroud, or Tyrone Tracy, Ladd McConkey, C.J. Stroud, try to get to Lamar, it would be an absolute no-brainer. I mean, a big thing here as well is you look at the options you have on the waiver wire, you can just easily backfill with running back depth pieces like Pacheco and Bucky Irving. So maybe to go out there and quote unquote overpay for Lamar to that team that needs some help at running back where we just simply don't. I mean, if you could send Brian Robinson, Tyrone Tracy, and C.J. Stroud and go get Lamar Jackson, maybe it seems like we're giving up a considerable amount of running back production. But if you go through and realistically think about this, I mean, we would presumably be able to pivot over and we would be able to just pick up Bucky Irving for completely free. You could pick up Isaiah Pacheco for completely free if we open up those roster spots. So effectively what that deal actually turns into being is that deal is actually, oh, okay, we sold Brian Robinson, Tyrone Tracy, CJ Stroud for Lamar Jackson, Bucky Irving, and Isaiah Pacheco. So 100% plan A is, can we go out there and quote unquote overpay for running back? I'm sorry, for quarterback. Because you have the great running backs down there on the waiver wire. I mean, you could very easily afford to do this. Is going over to wide receiver. It's a league where you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex as well. Obviously, we are absolutely crushing here. Where, I mean, right now, you are sitting with A.J. Brown, Malik Neighbors. We have Amari Cooper, Ladd McConkey. Tight end, we have the elite tight end with Travis Kelce. So you have an insane team. Really, the only thing I think we could possibly do is try to get that elite level quarterback, be willing to overpay for it. Obviously, plan A would be to go through and send the wide receiver depth pieces such as Amari Cooper, Ladd McConkey. But realistically speaking, knowing that this is a league in which there are only 10 teams, you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, you're probably not going to be able to get much value for selling those wide receiver depth pieces. So you're probably needing to go through and instead look to pivot off the running backs. But obviously, go put those feelers out right away. And I did hook you up with that free trade question and that free start sit question as well if you wanted to send anything my way. And yeah, 4-4 team, don't panic whatsoever. You have an absolute monstrous squad here, even in a 10-team format, where I think you are really in a position where there's no reason to worry, to be honest. But let's go ahead and let's move this over to our next question from BZ Young says, Ryan Thomas Jr. being a game time decision for the second slate is concerning. My assumption is we're probably going to get a little bit of additional information with Brian Thomas Jr. before we need to go out there and make the decision. Now, obviously, I very easily could be wrong. We don't know yet. But anyway, with how things sit here for the flex, we have Ramondre, Downs, Brian Thomas Jr. If Thomas is good to go, I would go with Thomas. If you think Mason, he won't be. If you are really concerned, you could pivot over to Josh Downs. But the thing as well is, I mean, I don't know. You do have the benefit of the doubt in that you have a potential pivot option where you could move over instead to Tank Bigsby if need be. Now, obviously, I'd rather not go to Tank Bigsby if we don't have to. But if you really needed to, you could. Now, Macho Man coming out with our next question says, Evans out, so don't know who to put into the 2 flex spots. Well, wide receiver, dear God. I probably go McMillan here for this wide receiver slot. Tight end, we're going to go Evan Ingram. Flex, we have Tracy. Thank God Tracy's good to go. Really, Tracy, absolute must-start running back in a fine matchup this week against Washington. Sportsbooks are higher on the Giants offense this week than they typically are. And yeah, it looks like Tracy is clear in the concussion protocol, something I didn't expect. Now, NJB says, site works for the 20 team. Yes, I got you hooked up, my friend. 5-3, 3-player keeper league, leaning towards no, not sure what to do with the squad. So again, if you haven't seen this, Noah's been out here with us forever now. It's a 20-team league where depth matters a ton. With this, McBride and Njoku, massive downgrade. Rico Dowdle matters a ton in a 20-team league. And you get London as well. So for me, I'm going to be going with the Dowdle, London, and McBride side of this. I think it would be a tough spot now that Myers is back to ever view Tucker as somebody that you could be looking at with excitement, even if you're in a situation in which it's a 20-team league, you have a bye week for London. I mean, Tugger's at best the third option, one of the worst offenses in the league. So, I don't know. For me, I think we go with the London side. But let's move this over to our next question. This one's coming out from Hugh Below says, feel like we have enough depth at wide receiver and we need an RB1. Ooh. I will say from a raw value perspective, the Brian Thomas Jr. DeAndre Swift side wins this relatively easily. The only hesitation that I have here is this is a 10-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league. So if it's a 10-team, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, then I mean at that point, clearly you are just kind of wanting to get the best player in the deal, and James Cook is the best player in it. For me, though, I think we're trying to go get Achane. We're trying to go get Taylor. We're trying to go get a locked and loaded RB1 if this is the price tag here. So I'd hold on to Swift and Brian Thomas. Now, PPAP says, just made this deal. How do we do? Thanks for the Dell starts that help. Also, love the content. Keep up the great work. Thank you. I think I would prefer Downs here. I think Downs is the best player now that you see the Colts pivot over to Anthony Richardson. To be honest with you, I don't think it's like an absolute no-brainer. I don't think it's like, oh my gosh, you win this and it's not even remotely close. But just realistically trying to think through this. It is a 10-team league where you only start 2 wide receivers in a flex, so the depth's not going to matter much. Amari, we still expect to expand his role in Buffalo. But yeah, more importantly, again, since it's a 2 wide receiver single flex format, the depth just doesn't particularly matter. Now, P. Burnap coming out with a free team review. Excited to check this out, my friend. Says, hey, Mason, appreciate all the advice. Need some advice on how to plan for the playoffs. Should I try to trade Henry for another RB with a better playoff schedule? If so, which running back would you aim for? So, yeah, Derrick Henry doesn't have the best playoff schedule, but, I mean, even with that being said, he's still Derrick Henry. If you were pivoting off of him, you're still needing to get in return one of the top RBs in either Saquon Barkley or Kyren Williams, and you can't really settle for much less. Team name here is Big P. We are currently second in the league analyzer. We are 6-2. It is a league in which you can't start 4 receivers weekly, but it's only a 10-team league, so you should have some pretty quality options when it comes to your potential waiver wire pickups. Looking at what you have here at quarterback, we have an elite QB with Josh Allen, somebody that we can play every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. Going over to tight end, we have an elite tight end with Bowers, somebody we can play every single week, regardless of what the matchup is. We have Hawkinson as a high upside play. Now, obviously, if you were to see Hawkinson come out super strong, then at that point, I mean, it would be advantageous for us to go through and for us to potentially sell Hawkinson in another piece in a 2-for-1 deal to go get that upgrade inside the starting lineup. Going over to what we have at running back, we are sitting with Henry and Montgomery. Montgomery already through the bye week. Henry isn't. Looking at Brooks, I was excited about the possibility of Brooks coming back this week. I thought he would have been back this week. He was practicing in full. He's not coming back, and if they don't activate him by Wednesday, then we won't get Brooks back at any point this season. So it is definitely a really thin running back room, where typically in this 10-team league, we're trying to build around running back rather than wide receiver at the bottom end. And going through and looking at all the wide receivers we have here, we have Chase London, so 2 locked and loaded wide receiver ones rest of season. We have Amari, Ladd, Downs, Hopkins, Keon. And then we have Tillman at the very bottom. I know maybe I'm a Tillman hater, blah, 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 blah. But at the very minimum, what I would look to do here personally, like if this was my team, and I'm just being honest, is I would drop Cedric Tillman and I'd pick up Calvin Ridley off the waiver wire. Calvin Ridley's out there seeing 8-9 targets a game with no DeAndre Hopkins. Presumably, you could look to get back in, say, Will Levis, and see this offense get a little bit better. Actually, sportsbooks are projecting this to be a better offense this week than what you had. I mean, what you've had for the past few weeks now. They're actually projected a win in this game against New England. But more importantly, I mean, the clear play is moving off of some of these wide receivers in trades and trying to go get running back help. Like waiver wire running backs, they're exciting options as well. You can go get Alexander Madison. Madison's getting guaranteed volume right now. I mean, Tyler Algier, Braylon Allen are both respectively in a situation in which if the starter were to go down in front of them, then all of a sudden they turn into must-start options every single week. So there are a couple different things that you could do here. One, dependent on the amount of flex spots that you have in your league. I'm sorry, IR slots that you have in your league. And if you could put players that are just listed as out on the IR, it would make a lot of sense for you to pivot from some of these wide receiver depth pieces over to the guys that are maybe injured, but give you upside for the fantasy football playoff stretch, like pivoting off of like Ladd, Downs, Hopkins, these guys over to like Metcalf, Higgins. I think that'd be a clear move. Pivoting off of London and going and getting Nico. One, it would give you more upside for the fantasy football playoff stretch. Two, if you're able to throw those guys on the IR, then you could potentially just use the open roster spots to build out the running back depth with like Alexander Madison, Tyler Algier, Braylon Allen, Ray Davis. Corey says running backs are hard to acquire. I mean, which is why we're going, and I figured that was the case given the league settings and given your team, which is why instead of going through and trading the wide receiver straight up for running backs, I think you can do it in a different, more unique way, which is why we're focusing on how can we get these running backs on the waiver wire onto our roster. Because outside of dropping Tillman for Calvin Ridley, I don't know if there's a situation in which it ever makes sense for us to go through and for us to be making that pivot and trying to trade a wide receiver for a running back when it's going to be impossible to. So, I mean, if you could, here's what I would do. I would try to consolidate wide receivers in 2-for-1 deals, where if you can take Keon and Hopkins, package them together to go get Higgins. If you can take Downs and Ladd, package them together to go get Metcalf. These guys that have the ceiling for the fantasy football playoffs. Also, at the same time, if you were potentially able to go through and look to swing some free running backs off the waiver wire with the roster spots you open up from those 2-for-1 deals, that's the move that I think you're looking to make. Because obviously we're already elite at quarterback. Obviously we're already elite at tight ends. It's not like you're in a situation in which you have a ton of things that we can be looking to do. I think consolidating wide receivers in 2-for-1 deals and prioritizing the guys with the upside for the fantasy football playoffs that may come at a discount right now because they are injured, that is what I would personally be looking at. But I really do appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way here. Again, if there is anything else I can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. But yeah, thank you so much again for taking advantage of that free team review. But moving this over to our next question. This one's coming out from AB. It says, redraft league, 2-player keeper, Jones for Hunt in a 7th. I'm just going to want Aaron Jones here. Thing with Kareem Hunt is you don't have a guarantee on if he's going to be the guy rest of season. You have a very real possibility that Pacheco comes in. So, yeah, I don't see how you could go with the Hunt side. Even, a 7th round pick's not going to make that big of a difference. Now, Mont Baby coming out with our next one. This is going to be St. Brown versus Tracy, Reed, and Debo. So, mid wide receiver 1 for an RB2, a wide receiver 2, and a low end wide receiver 1. Looking at the league settings here and looking at the running back room, yeah, this is a deal we make. This is a 12-team league in which you can start up to 4 wide receivers weekly. I don't like giving up the best player. I definitely think Amon-Ra St. Brown is the best player here, but with the Brandon Ayuk injury coming out of the bye week, I will be ranking Deebo Samuel as a low-end wide receiver 1 rest of season. So yeah, I think we go with the Deebo side. Now, I think we need a refresh see if we had any more questions come in. We have 2 more. LP Cabrera coming out. This is Tua and Taylor for Allen and Chubb. This is what I was thinking when we were saying to go out there and see if we can overpay for a quarterback. Is would we make the move with Taylor? So this is the team where we are just absolutely loaded at running back and wide receiver. And really the only thing that this team could do is potentially go out there and make that play for the elite quarterback. Again, my preferred deal, of course, would be sending Brian Robinson and Ramadre, or Ramadre and Tracy, or Brian Robinson and Tracy, and sending 2 of those guys for Allen and keeping the best player in Taylor. Like, Chubb doesn't move the needle. The depth running back doesn't really matter for us. I'm going to mark the Taylor side as the winner because I do think the Taylor side has the majority of the value. But if this is the best price you could get the elite quarterback for, then this is the best price you could get the elite quarterback for. But again, I do want to reiterate, I do think that the Taylor side does have the best value, the most value. But I completely understand us going out there and overpaying for that elite quarterback because the team is just so damn strong at wide receiver and running back. I'd highly prefer selling the depth running backs in a package, though. Now, going over to our next question, coming out from Braden, says, is this a fair deal or should we keep CMC? Do a 2-for-1 deal for a receiver. So Cup and Ramadre, let's go Cup. Let's go CMC, Debo versus Barkley. Up to you. Ramadre, Cup versus Jefferson. Give me Jefferson. I think that this is a very fair price tag if you're moving off of CMC. Barkley and Jefferson are already through their bye weeks as well. You can make an argument to have both Barkley and Jefferson running back 1, wide receiver 1 rest of season here. Obviously, if CMC comes in and is prime CMC, you probably lose this trade, but you are just getting rid of all the potential risk that you would have with that. Dude, I think you go with Barkley and Jefferson. But let's mark that complete. And who's Ryan coming out with our next question? Says, what can we do to get ready for the playoffs? Thanks for the help thus far. Also, Dax on the waiver wire. Should we stash? Currently sitting at 7-1. Really appreciate you, my guy. Excited to look at this. 7-1. Team name is Rams House. We are 4th in the league analyzer. So obviously we are looking at the best options off waivers and the best options specifically for the fantasy football playoffs. And 100% actually won. Let me not forget, we should hook you up with a free trade question and a free start sit question as well, just in case you have anything else with this team that you want to send my way. But second thing with that is looking at the pivot from Geno to Dak on waivers is super easy to do. Cut Geno, go pick up Dak, and play Dak this week over Baker. You have a much higher total in the Dallas offense than you should expect in the Bucs offense. Please pivot off Geno and go get Dak. Now going over to running back. We have an elite RB with Henry. We have Swift, White, Bucky, Roschon. If I'm correct, and this is a non-PPR format, who's Ryan? Can you come out and confirm that this is non-PPR? This is an insane running back room with Derrick Henry at the top. Obviously, non-PPR format. We are more so incentivized to go through and throw the running back into the flex on top of this. Wide receiver, you have Tyreek, Kupp, Terry, Higgins. So we have Higgins for the long-term upside. Tyreek, Kupp already through the bye. The main play here is to see what we can get, obviously, by selling Kraft. Is there a team that could potentially use help at tight end? Please tell me there is. Like the issue is it's a 10-team league. The worst tight end room in the league arguably is sitting with Pitts. This team has Andrews and Likely. I've noticed this. This is definitely a problem with the league analyzer. Why is this grading this as the 10th tight end room in the league when it's clearly worse than Andrews? For whatever reason, like Andrews is getting extra points in the league analyzer for no apparent reason. But this team here doesn't have a tight end, and their wide receiver too is Juwan Jennings. If we were going to make a trade with this, I mean, with any team in this league, it's this one right here. And we could possibly go out there and get to Jalen Hurts. It is a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format. So 2 wide receiver, single flex league. I mean, and non-PPR, potentially getting the elite quarterback would just be absolutely massive. Like if you could send them Terry, Laporta, Baker, and go get to Jalen Hurts. It'd be an absolute no-brainer. Because then at that point, we're still sitting with enough running back production, of course, enough wide receiver production. We have 3 tight ends that are viable. You could go ahead and you could potentially not even roster the second quarterback and instead pick up a high upside running back like Braylon Allen, Ray Davis, in case you were getting injury in one of their respective backfields. Is there anything else that we could look to do here? This team has Evan Ingram. Yeah, the issue is just teams in this league are going to be fine at tight end. I think this is the only team that it makes sense to make that trade with. They need a wide receiver. They need tight end help. We have both for them. Is there the issue with us also going through and looking to sell wide receiver is Obviously, when we're 7-1, we're looking to pivot for long-term options for the fantasy football playoffs and buy guys that maybe are going to be injured in the short term, but have the ceiling in the long term. That's exactly Higgins. Rachaad White's a clear sell high candidate in this league as well. Another thing that you could look to do is if we can find a team that needs some running back production. Like White, you've had the touchdowns over the past few weeks, so he has looked solid, but underlying this, the usage with Bucky Irving doesn't bode well for White. The issue is there's not really another team in this league that really needs running back depth. So the main thing is if we can get out of one of those tight ends, we can pivot over to the elite level quarterback. That team that has Jalen Hurts, it makes sense to send them a receiver, send them a tight end, go get the elite quarterback in the long term. If you don't want to do that, the other pivots we would make, or if we can't do that, we would drop Geno, we would pick up Dak Prescott off the waiver wire, and also we would cut Gabe Davis, and we would prioritize a running back off the waiver wire where if you were to see that injury at the very top, to James Cook, Ray Davis becomes the league winner. If Breece Hall goes down, Braylon Allen becomes the league winner. So yeah, cut Gabe Davis, pick up the premium handcuff back, try to trade the tight end, go get that quarterback upgrade. We can include a depth wide receiver if need be, and then also move off of Geno and pick up Dak off with the waiver wire. But I did hook you up with a free start sit question and a free trade question, my guy, if you had anything else that you wanted to send in my direction. But text radar, always happy to see you. Let me hook you up with a free start sit question. Says, we have 3 flex options left. Should we play Darnold for Love even if healthy? I would prefer Love over Darnold if Love is good to go. It's a great matchup. It's a good matchup for both. Stash flex Dowdle. Stash any tight end listed on the waiver wire for Njoku by week 10. I can't see the waiver wire options. I don't think you really bother about... Oh, no. Okay, these are the guys listed on waivers. If we were looking at anybody here, it would be Frymuth. I don't think we drop any of these options for Frymuth yet, though. You said we need 3 flex options. Okay. So I'm assuming you mean we just need 1 flex, and we have 3 options to choose from between Rico, Chubb, and Shakir. For me, it honestly is going to come... Oh, dear God. The thing with Dowdle is it should be a phenomenal game environment against Atlanta. You have an over-under of about 53.5 points in this game. I still assume that he is the starting running back. Obviously, he's not giving you anything in a very long time. So, I'm going to take Dowdle. I don't think it's an easy call, but we can run with it. If Amari misses, we can pivot to Shakir for sure. But Kenny coming out with a start-sit question. 4-4, got unlucky some weeks, 6-point passing touchdown league. Stack with Kupp, or we have some faith with Baker. If Puka misses, this is honestly with the Puka injury, just go Baker. But the thing is, if you look at implied team totals, right now sportsbooks are telling us that this should be a bottom 5 offense in Tampa going up against KC. It is a really tough matchup. Obviously, it's not like Baker has the rushing upside of Kyler. It's not like he has the rushing upside of any of the elite guys. But he will run the ball some in comparison to Stafford, which will give you absolutely 0. So, yeah, I think you go Baker, especially with Puka re-injuring the knee. Now, Shady coming out with a start set. Here, going down to the flex spots, we have no Brooks this week. We have no Nico this week. Reed looks like he's going to have Love, so I think you jam in Reed. I think we play Ramondre as well. I mean, with Ramondre's been, and we're going to go Kraft since Love should be playing. And again, with Ramondre, he's been horrendous in any game environment in which you have had the New England Patriots losing, especially by a decent amount. But this is a game, while they are dogs against the Titans, they could possibly win it. And any game New England wins, Ramondre crushes. And Chicken Tendies, love the name, says 3-5, so in a tough spot, needs some running back depth. I think Smith is the better. We have Gibbs. We have Connor. Both players through their bye. I know we're super strong at wide receiver. I don't say that we need running back that bad. I'd rather have Smith over Swift. If you wanted to go make this move, if we could sell Amari for Swift, let's do it. If you could sell Flowers for Swift, I'd do that in a heartbeat. I'll throw Flowers and Keon in the direction of Swift if you want to do this. I think that'd be a better deal than selling Smith for him straight up. But your boy is through the questions. Usually we'd answer some free questions in the live chat, but I have a 50-mile ultra marathon in about 7 hours. I'll be waking up in about 5 hours for it. I should not have live streamed this late. I did not think that there were going to be this many questions. I should have called it a lot earlier. So wish me luck. We'll be running 50 miles very, very soon. I'll be live streaming tomorrow night, of course. I'll be live streaming Sunday morning. You better believe it. I'm nervous, and I should have gone to bed a long time ago. But it is what it is. Nothing a little caffeine can't fix. But much love, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope I get to see you tomorrow night.